most of you now, you've been with us at least one or two, but I think the idea here is we are just, this is a training or a collective of clinicians that are just about clinicians for clinicians, Clinicians United. The idea that we want to take our collective wisdom, we want to have fun with EMDR, we want to not be freaked out by EMDR. We want to embrace EMDR as the friend that it is and not be afraid that we're going to use this bazooka gun on our patients and their heads are going to explode or something or other, but that instead we can just take the pieces of it, the parts of it that make the most sense for wherever our client is, whether it is in terms of their the time with us, their rapport, their stabilization, where they might be on a dissociation scale, where they might be in addiction or in recovery, where they might be in actively participating in a compulsion or an unwanted behavior versus having maybe just gotten a handle on that. So depending on where they are, we can just take the pieces of it that make the most sense, and then we can move the heavy furniture later on. When we're going to go and do the excavation or the early childhood trauma, full unrestricted reprocessing. Something that Linda has been thinking about, and I think it's a really good way of thinking about this, and you may be hearing it here first, or as often is the case, we may be both heard it somewhere else and we're just repeating it.
And we're saying it's ours now.
And we're saying it's ours. But that the idea of looking at EMDR in sort of two buckets: unrestricted reprocessing, the full deal, all the way back to the beginning and everything and wherever it wants to go, and using all of the tools. We're just going to see where they go, and we're going to just keep following and protecting them or helping them along the way. But the full thing versus restricted processing, where we are just going to be keeping them tight on something so that we can do a specific piece of work and not have them going all the way out. And there's a variety of reasons why we might want to do one versus the other. If they're prone to dissociation, we may have to teach them a bunch of tools and give them a bunch of skills so that in a session, we could have some confidence that we can quickly pull them back into the room and into the here and now. If we've not already done that work when they don't yet know how to ground, or we've never done it with them before, but they are suddenly talking in a child's voice in their bedroom. So that's not a great situation. So we want to do some of that skills building first. So restricted reprocessing could be, or restricted processing could be some of that resourcing work that we could be doing that is very much just focused on strengthening. Can they maybe connect to a memory network where they might say, "Uh-oh, I'm back somewhere"? They might, and you might make a decision at that point, since you've not done the work, to say, let's just hold on to that, or can we put that into a container? I did teach you that already. Or can we just sort of like note that, and I promise we'll get back to it. I'm writing it down, but let's just stay with peaceful place, container, this or that, whatever it is, and really do that work, which I guess you could call restricted. It's funny, I've been working that way for a while, but until Linda called to my attention this idea of, are we doing restricted processing or are we doing unrestricted? I don't know that I've always thought about it that way, but I think it is useful because you can sort of even know before you're starting the session. So I have a guy who is a gay guy who is married, but his big issue is he's got a lot of compulsive sexuality, and it wreaks havoc on his relationship and his self-esteem, etc. So what we're doing is, we got the whole thing. We've done all the assessment. We know what probably the roots are of all of this in terms of his complex trauma. We know how he's behaving currently. He's been plugged in. I've been encouraging him to do the sort of structural things that one can do and one should do with regard to any addiction. So he's in an S fellowship, a 12-step program for Sexual Compulsive Anonymous. He's working with a sponsor. He's doing first step work, which is very much about, just the beginning and sort of, acknowledging the unmanageability of his behavior. And I know already, and he and I have started to talk about what are the early roots, and we've got a bunch of them. But what he and I agreed to last time is he is still behaving in a way that is that bums him out. He is still getting himself in trouble and spending too much time on sex apps and too much time running around town and hooking up with people, and it's not helping him. So what we decided to do instead was restricted EMDR. We're going to do the buzzkill piece, which I've talked about a little bit, which is really just unpairing sort of these positive feeling states he has with these compulsive behaviors that he doesn't want to have paired with anymore. So we're going to do that work, and then we're going to resource or strengthen more adaptive behaviors to replace, to still get him to the same place he wants to get, which is I'm loved and I'm valued and I'm validated and all that stuff. And that's all we're going to do. So I said between now and next time, send me the 4 biggest behaviors that are you're having the most trouble with, that make you feel the worst, that when you've done them, you're sitting there thinking, crap, I did that again. So he's going to send those to me, and those are our targets, for the 4, for 4 or 5 or however many buzzkill sessions. That's restricted, if you will, or deconstructed, or using a part of the EMDR in an innovative way, and that makes sense for him because we just don't really want to be going and doing the early work. So so that's that example versus somebody who's fully resourced, not dissociating, had a car accident, is otherwise just having a great life, but is coming in with very, very specific, and this is the most the easiest example, right? These very specific sort of PTSD symptoms, and then go unrestricted. I mean, you're still going to have done all of your assessment and your history taking. You're still going to probably want to, as Linda will talk about later today, do dissociation screening. But if that's all green light, then just go in for it. Just go see, because you want to know, is that car accident, did it remind him of that one thing in the past that's freaking him out right now? And you want to clear all of the channels versus somebody who is spinning their wheels, and you want to just try to help contain that before you also get caught back in the vortex of their whole early life. So I don't know. Hopefully, if you guys at some point have feedback about whether or not that's a useful concept or construct, or 2 buckets of restricted EMDR versus unrestricted, or restricted sort of processing versus unrestricted processing, you'll let us know if that
Well,
makes
but
sense.
you can let us know today, but I just want to say one more thing about it. I mean, you're going to hear, or you have heard, emdr puts out different things all the time, flash technique, 2.0, all these different names, but basically what it is there's there's something that's restricted, right? You're only, like, if it's acute, you're only doing this particular thing. I wanted to talk about the DES2, and I put it over there so you guys can download it if you can. It's the color-coded one, and there's scoring with it. And I'm going to share my screen with you. It's really not hard to understand, right? It's color-coded, and here's the scoring right here. And I just want to go over real quick. It's color-coded for a reason. Absorption for yellow, right? If somebody has a lot of hyper focus, that can be ADHD. That can be a lot of different things, right? People can just be, I'm watching a TV, I get so involved in it that somebody calls my name more than once. Now, when you look at amnesia, that's going to be in PTSD, and it's going to be in complex PTSD, and they all should really be considered dissociative disorders. Depersonalization and derealization, when you see that, and if you're high in those greens right here, it says the questions are like, sometimes I have experience feeling as though I'm standing next to myself, or some people experience looking at a mirror and not recognizing themselves. Some people have the feeling that other people around them are not real. Some people sometimes have experiences that their body does not belong to them. Some people have experiences of being in a familiar place, but they're unfamiliar with that place. Some people feel as though they're looking at the world through a fog. All of those things, depersonalization and derealization, It should tell you immediately that this is severe and early trauma. Already, you know that your stage 1 safety and stabilization is going to take a long time. And a long time does not mean 3 weeks or 4 months. It means until the person has the skills to stay stable. Fantasy prone, I've seen many people with ADD or have trauma and narcissistic traits that go into this fantasy mode. So that's not something that I would go, oh, absolutely, this is a dissociative disorder. But in narcissism, you see fantasy as it's auto-regulation rather than self-regulation, right? So they go into a dissociative stance into these fantasy things. So it's trauma-based, but you see it in other disorders as well. And then the blue one, some people have experience of being accused of lying when they don't think they have lied. Some people find themselves dressed in clothes that they don't remember putting on, or they find themselves having belongings that they don't remember buying. That's ego states. If you see a lot of this aqua blue, you're looking at least DDNOS, if not DID. I'm going to get out of the screening right now, but I just want to say, here's how you score it. All you do is you add it all up, and if the answer is more than 30, you go, okay, there's never been a person that had below a 30 and had DID, right? So you're seeing all these right here. Can everybody see what I'm looking at? Generalized adult population. The score of 5 is normal. So some fantasy or some absorption is just ordinary dissociation. But again, when you're looking at the aqua colored ones and you're looking at the green colored ones, you say this is early and often severe trauma almost every time. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen with you.
Linda, just to clarify, you're not adding up all of the numbers for a total number. You're just saying within each of those bands.
No, you are. The average of all answers is the DES score, giving a maximum of 100. The questions are scored by dropping the 0 on the percentage of each answer.
Okay. There you go.
Okay, so 30% equals 3, 80% equals 8. These numbers are then added to give a total. The total is multiplied by 10 and divided by 28 because that's how many questions there are. That's the answer. Like that's all the math you have to do.
I see.
So anyway, I want to talk just a little bit about assessment. Now, the screenings that I do, that's one screening that I do. I work generally with people that have a diagnosis of complex PTSD or borderline personality disorder. Okay, there's a difference. The difference is that with complex PTSD, you do not need a genetic predisposition. With borderline personality disorder, the genetic predisposition is the high sensitivity of the nervous system. So Elaine Aron has a lot of work. Jay Belke has a lot of work in this sensitivity across species. It's not just us. 15 to 20% of the human population has a higher sensitivity than typical, right? So 15 to 20% of people have this, right? Now, if you have a high sensitivity, it means get activated more quickly, stay activated for longer periods of time. It takes them much longer to come down, and then the next stressor. So if you have anybody that has a high sensitivity and had poor parenting, right? You're looking at the dead orchids, right? Because these are people that if they have good parenting, what you see is they're the leaders of the troop. But with bad parenting, it affects them much more. And any kind of trauma in childhood would affect them much more. So they need more downtime. But if you have an abusive caretaker, right, there is no downtime and there is no ability to be regulated by another because the primary caretaker dysregulates, like they don't regulate the person. So usually what you see is the person dissociates because there is none, right? It's the escape where there is no escape. So when I'm going to say one more time, if you're looking at high scores in that aqua and in that green, you are looking at severe trauma, early trauma, right? That means you are not saying, let's do an EMDR session with this person. It means I have all of those skills. DBT, I like to say DBT skills they're put together nicely. They're not new or anything, but to be mindful means the opposite of dissociation. So we have to sell the idea of being in the here and now and being embodied, because that's a really hard sell for people who have been in relationships and they've always, the interpersonal betrayal is that their thing, right? If you have somebody that has a high sensitivity and interpersonal betrayal or abandonment, they're not looking at any other diagnosis except borderline personality disorder. But it's been my experience that if I have a client with the DID diagnosis, one of those parts always has borderline personality disorder, always has the traits for it. And I'm not saying that's always the case for everybody, but it has been the case in the last 20 years for me. So I think that these assessments are really, at least the screenings or these assessments are really helpful in to get, so you get an idea, wrap your head around who's in front of you, not by diagnosis, but what their predisposition was and what their history was. So that you say, in the phenotype meets these interactions with the caretaker, and then what? So I have the 3 assessments, and I put the DES up there, and I want people to use the DES and see if you take in new clients, or even if you don't, use the DES and see if it's not helpful. Even if you're just saying, okay, I've had this person for 2 years and I've been in safety and stabilization, maybe I give this and see where we are in dissociation, or see, how they are with attachment strategies. Because if you have if you have early trauma, it means you generally have attachment trauma, right? Because it means either that person that was your primary caretaker was unable to protect you from somebody else, or they were the ones that were dysregulating you, by abuse. And neglect is what we neglect, but abuse or neglect, right? So if you don't have a primary caretaker to attach to, you're really open to prey in a whole lot of other areas, right? But it's generally going to go back to, do you have secure or insecure attachment? And insecure attachment looks different, right? And if you have if you have severe and early and often trauma, it looks like DID or DDNOS. You see a lot of that structural dissociation, like the self does not develop. So you send people home to do self-help, and there is no self, right? The self is still contingent because it hasn't been built, because there hasn't been an attachment figure to give, you cannot develop a mind without another human mind, right? And so sometimes we are that human mind. If you work with couples, sometimes you have a couple that you can do the attachment work with, somebody that has avoidant attachment and somebody that has anxious attachment, you can do that kind of work. But a lot of times it's you're the first one that's going to be the first attachment figure that hasn't betrayed, hopefully, right, and is trustworthy. And that's the big thing about being working with trauma, is being trustworthy. Like, it took me a long time to become trustworthy to people, right? And and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just I came by my wounds honestly too, right? And a lot in our field, you see a lot of narcissism, and I want to help, I want to fix, I want to do these things. And if that's, if that's you, or that's somebody that you're supervising, you really want to call them on it, because it's real hard to tell what's the client's, what's relational, until you know what's yours, right? And nobody wants to look at narcissism because it sounds bad, but really it's just it's just a learning, right? If your primary caretakers never met your bids for attachment, you generalized and learned that that's not going to happen. So you can tamp down your attachment needs and be curious about other things. Whereas with anxious attachment, that ain't going to happen, right? It's usually the primary caretaker cannot regulate, I'll say herself, right? Cannot regulate herself, and therefore can't teach that through just interactions, right? So we have to be able to teach that in relation, right? With people with anxious attachment strategies, it has to be taught in a relation. And anybody that had severe and often trauma, all of these things need to be put in that frame, right? And so if they're, if that's who you're working with, don't, like, EMDR is kind of often the distance, but it doesn't mean you can't use these restricted sessions with these folks, because a lot of it is building these skills, like DBT skills, using alternating bilateral stim and using these behavioral rehearsals or relational do-overs, where people they got it wrong again, and it's like, it feels like they do it all the time. This feels very familiar, that they just had this fight and they blew up or whatever. And so you can have them do either Dear Man or Give. Is it Give, the other one? So you can do those skills and tap them in. I see you smiling, Jen Burns.
It's easier for those of us who do DBT. When you speak the language, it helps us integrate, because I think a lot of us are not doing, obviously we're not doing single trauma EMDR, we're doing attachment trauma EMDR. And so it's so much easier to integrate how to take this and add it to that when you can actually speak our language. So I
you
appreciate
can say what Dear Man means. Go ahead.
Dear Man is how to ask for what you want effectively.
Yeah,
without
right.
making people feel like you're manipulating them, which is a curse word in DBT.
The manipulation is how they learn to communicate. So again, people get it like it's bad or it's wrong. It's like, no, that's where the error comes from, the being missed.
Well, I think in the field, it has to do with sort of historically how folks have looked at people with borderline personality disorder and seen them as manipulative. And so it's a pejorative adjective. And what we say is short-term effective, long-term ineffective. And that's the same thing, right? They've learned how to get their needs met, but not in a way that is long-term effective or leaves the other person in the interaction feeling good about them helping this person get their needs met.
If it's somebody intimate to you versus somebody that it's more transactional, right? So you have different skills for that. And I think practicing those skills using the alternating bilateral stim is a really effective way to do it. That's what I wanted to practice, those kind of things, because people that if you're doing your second set of DBT skills, you know that either it's borderline personality disorder or complex PTSD with some interpersonal betrayal, right? So it's one or the other, but it's usually the other. Usually I say with borderline personality disorder, and it's just the wound. Again, I don't mean it maliciously, and I wish they'd change the name to emotion dysregulation disorder, right? Because that's what it is. I mean, with interpersonal abandonment, so it's too long, that name. I'll have to come up with something better. Anyway, I just want to go back to, I want to do it in terms that people understand, right? Okay, if you do DBT, great. If you don't do DBT, you should at least know what the package of skills are, because again, I think I said this before, Marsha Linehan will tell you that really is the only thing in the literature that says is effective, right? But it's not effective to give somebody a book and say, here, learn this. It's effective to do it with the person. And you're not going to get an opportunity to do all of them. But if you do this imaginal work, then you absolutely can. And that would be a restricted session, because say you're still doing like stabilization skills and you do this behavioral, like we're going to do a relational do-over with an argument using Dear Man. A trauma might come up, early trauma might come up, and the person doesn't have the skills, and you already know that. So you've already had to teach them how to contain that, right? So the bigger memory will come up. Yeah, of course it's mom, or of course it's whomever, but we're going to put that away. And Babette Rothschild said, this is the very first thing I learned in trauma was you never hit the gas if you don't know the patient has a break, right? And it's always about, can you break? Can you contain this? Like in a training, we are going to go over the skills to stay stable, and we go over EMDR readiness. And I trust that therapists know what that means. And that I also trust that they can take care of themselves and say, this, I want to do more resourcing because I'm not sure that I have the skills, right? But some people, if you think the client has the skills and they don't, and it goes bad, what do? You do what you always do as a therapist, which is ground the client, right? You get so if they're flooded or if they're dissociated, one is you're bringing arousal levels down. The other is you're bringing arousal levels down, both of them, right? So when somebody's dissociated, you have to get them back in the room. But when they come back in the room, they're going to be in a sympathetic nervous system state. So then you still have to bring all the arousal levels down and get them back in the room. Who are you? Where are you? When are you? So one of the things I'd like to do is to do something like that, either bring your worst client, and we'll do a session sort of like that, or we'll do I mean, those are the kind of things that I think would be helpful with most people, are those relational do-overs, or building mindfulness skills, or the interpersonal relationship skills that they don't have any of, right? And it's always going poorly. I think that those things are really they're ripe for for these behavioral imaginal rehearsal things. Dr. Jennifer Burns, did you raise your hand up? You raise your hand?
I did. I just learned how to do that. When we're tapping in, I love the idea of tapping in DBT skills. It's brilliant. Would you also, I'm guessing the answer is yes, but I just want to know for sure. Would you also do all the resourcing first? With the nurturer and the protector and the nurturer throw our people for a loop because they don't have them.
Right. So I would always do the container first. That's the one I do first, because I always say that it's a crowd favorite, and I'm the crowd. Right. So because I think that it's one of the ones that you can really have people practice like the very first time you meet them. I mean, I used to do 2-day trainings or 3-day trainings, and therapists would use it in between this time, like with people to contain either their abandonment, whatever they, whatever was up for them. So the container I would do, comfortable place I would do. Triumphant self is the one that I think is the best for that, because again, we said this last time about people just, when you're depressed or, trauma, it really makes you forget that you've had successes. It really makes you forget that you have been successful in challenging areas before. And even if, if you're working with kids, it's, teacher said something nice about this work, or somebody pointed out how good your artwork was, those kind of things. And all of those things, I think we can tap in. All of anybody that can shift states that where they couldn't before, I think that should be tapped in, because it's really, how did you do it? Kelly, you have your hand up, huh?
Yeah. So I'm thinking about a client. When I did the dissociative assessment, she falls in between the PTSD and the DID NOS. So she does we have talked about where she's not present sometimes, and might zone out sometimes, but she doesn't have any states where she's, not remembering chunks of time or so. And we've done a lot of the safe place. She can ground herself. She can do a lot of those things. The first trauma was death of dad, and mom, lovely woman she's been in, but her managing was just to buck up and everybody's going to work together, and there was no crying in baseball. And she's sensitive. Didn't work. And then there was lots of traumas before, and she's got a lot of relational stuff, a lot of attachment stuff where she puts herself in these really shitty, unsafe relationships. She got her master's degree a long time ago to be an addictions counselor, and just, boy, had relationships with a lot of addicts. And I'm wondering if, because I'm feeling a little, we've been doing all the skill building, I'm feeling a little nervous to hit some of the early traumas with the EMDR, but I'm wondering if, from what you're saying, maybe doing rehearsals with EMDR, as if she could set some, because she regrets not setting some of these boundaries, but maybe kind of a do-over with some of the boundaries. Would that be useful?
I think that's perfect, right? Because that's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like somebody says, oh, I'm always in this, it's the same relationship, right? But it didn't look that way in the beginning, but it's like, I'm with the same guy or the same girl or whatever, I'm with the same person, only it didn't look that way in the beginning. So absolutely, I would say, like, how would you have liked it to turn out? Right. Because usually they're using the skills that they know, right? Whether, I mean, Jen was saying manipulation, but manipulation just means that I don't believe that I am going to get my needs met. So I have to go get them covertly like I did as a kid. Right.
Yeah, she goes and rescues, and it's even with friends. She rescues for that connection.
Yeah, and the connection is if you're needed, you're needed.
Yeah.
But what has to be explained is people stay because they want to stay, not because they need you. And the idea of, presenting it in a different way. Have you ever seen it done well? And that's really what you need. They have to have some neural net that they've seen somebody do it well and it go well. Because the big thing with anger too is there's a lot of folks that won't show their anger because they've only seen it acted out poorly, rather than it's an emotion that comes up and it gives you information and you decide after that what you do with it. Right. I think here it's like saying, like, absolutely, the last time it happened, and I always do the last time it happened, because people come in and they're in a crisis again because the same thing happened, or I don't know, I don't know, but she's not talking to me. Okay, do you want to talk about that? Is that something you want to work on? I always ask in the beginning, because I have this one person that will just meander, for I do 75-minute sessions because I don't do them every week, So I know in the first 15 minutes what we're going to, I usually say, and how can I help you today? Right. And that really puts it back on the client of what do you want? What do you want to work on? And if they say, oh, I don't really know, that never came up before. It's like, okay, I'll give you a couple minutes to think about it. What's the most important thing right now? Or what's the most important thing long term? And I think if you go long term, I want to have relationships. I want to have a family, or I want to be able to have this job, like whatever the goals are. Okay, well, how can we use this particular incident, to get you closer to that? So I mean, these kind of relationships where it's like, give me the example of the most recent one.
Well, so she chronically grieves the loss of this very abusive relationship, but there's a friend that she thought was a good friend. And he gave her rides a lot because she doesn't drive. She's very heavy. But she realized after she ended the friendship, just before he went to jail again, that she was giving him a lot of money, and she was actually driving because he needed the car ride to places she didn't really want to go. And he's just out of jail again and reached out to her, and she's thinking the friendship can be different. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I would do that right in the session.
Yeah.
I would do let's see how that goes. We're going to imagine it. So you meet him again, and how's it going to be different? Tell me. And because she has to be able to imagine that he's going to be a totally different person, right? And then you say, well,
she's actually imagining herself a little different. She's trying.
Okay.
She's like getting there.
But I mean, so with this behavioral rehearsal, what you do is, okay, so how you think you're going to have a relationship that's different this time. You can have a friendship with somebody who's done nothing but exploit and abuse you. Do you think it's going to be different this time? So I would like to see, what does that look like? Let's do a little imaginal, here, take these tappers and let's see how that looks. And I think that it goes right back to either when you start the tapping, if you leave them on for a long period of time, it's going to go back to the early relationship, right? But I would say keep that out of it for now and say, let's just go back to when you first met this person and go through all of all of the good, the bad, the ugly. And I'm sure there's much more bad and ugly, right? So go through that and then say, okay, so let's see how it's going to be different. So how he's going to be different now that he's coming out of jail. Usually in jail, they learn a lot of really good skills, interpersonal skills, and they're really ready to come back into society. I mean, really, and that's what I would do. So how's it going to be different? So you're going to be with them. So let's play that out. So what happens? And then he says, and you're going to have to bring up something like he's asking for money because he's gonna, right? I mean, people do, I'm kidding about the recidivism rate's pretty high for a reason, right? So I'm thinking, what do? You say, okay, what was it like? Okay, what did he do? He borrows money. He asked you to take him places where you don't want to go. And so any of those ones, you can say, okay, so what is it that you want to say? What do you want to do? Have you ever seen anybody say no? Have you ever seen anybody say no and that person hear the no? Because he's not going to be one of the people that hears a no, right? You really want to do it with people who actually would hear it, So if you're in a group or something, or somebody that, that's not real close to that, you can say, no, I don't want to do that. And as in give, like you don't lose that intimate relationship. It's a little bit different, it's more transactional.
So what I'm anticipating coming up is she does hang on very tightly to the positive in people. And there have been some nice ways that this person showed up for her.
Okay.
Like when she was having bad times, but then it's always because there's something in it for him later on.
And you go say, well, and then what? And then what happened? I mean, that's and then what, or where do you feel that in your body, or and then what happened? They're the two questions, right? Because it's going to get to all the times he exploited her, all the times that she did something that was not, not just her volition, but that it like went against what she thought was right. And so how do you lose yourself to this person again? And what would be, what would be somebody that had boundaries? What would they say? So that's what I'm saying. They have to have some idea of what it would look like to do it differently. Make sense?
Yeah.
Linda, the other thing that I'm thinking of is this is very much like the way I would work with somebody who has had an addiction. They might be able to make the case for all the times when the alcohol worked for them or when sex worked for them or whatever. But then the question is, and then what? Let's connect the consequences. Are there consequences at the end? And with bilateral stimulation and with them being able to have both their right and left brain available to sort of, integrate this experience in this new way, they really do see, yeah, it's true. It is going to end up that way. And they just have much more agency than they did before. So
Bessel always talks about, if you don't have a sense, like a felt sense of being seen or validated or any of those things, you have to bring up something that they've seen it somewhere else, right? Because you have to have some neural network to connect to. So I would think that you could do role play with this person of what would you like to say, and then do the imaginal resourcing, or have that, there's plenty of TV shows or movies where people do it well, where people put up a boundary and the other person doesn't die or kill them, right? It's like, oh, okay, like that makes sense. There's plenty of things you can show people, but people generally have an idea of seeing it done well and being astonished. That's what I find, being astonished that, you could be angry with somebody and still keep that relationship, or you can have an argument and that person doesn't, collapse or doesn't leave. And I think that when you're in relationship with people who are very unhealthy, which a lot of people, this is just me because I was in it, right? So in 12-step programs, a lot of those people are leaving that day. That's it for, that's 50% of them are going out that night. So you have to be careful with who you're doing the work with. And so I even do those behavioral rehearsals on going into 12-step meetings, like I call it surviving your support group, right? Because the hugging and the God and the things that people have problems with, okay, what can you do instead? Because you still, you want to make use of this peer support group because it's free and it's ubiquitous, right? But how do you make use of it? With what's the last time you were there, this old lecherous guy said this or that, what could you have done differently, besides find a new group?
You talked about earlier about container versus, calm please. I was trained.
No, both of them.
Correct. So I was trained ending with a container, and then of course do small breathing resourcing. So recently I had a client, she said every session was ended not with container, but just calm place. I was wondering if you do both in one session after each EMDR session, or does it matter one or the other?
Well, it depends. I mean, we're talking about unrestricted sessions here. We're just talking like if we are talking about that, I mean, there's going to be some things that you don't cover because you've opened up all of these neural networks, right? And you're putting them all away because you can't work with everything. I use all of them in every session, right? So I do container, comfortable place, protector figure, nurturing figure. I'll get back to that in a second. And triumphant self, all those, I think all of those 5, and it only takes 5 minutes to activate all of them, right? It's not like you have to do too much because people have already been using, they've already been using these resources. So I use them in the beginning, and at the end, it's, sometimes we'll go to a comfortable place. If there's open material, that's the greatest place to put, that's for the container. But if there's not, it's just you want to get somebody back in their window of tolerance so you can go. You could put everything in a container and just, have your feet on the floor. Do you feel, look around, what do you see? What are the colors you see? It's basically saying you're getting somebody back embodied and oriented ×3. And sometimes it's just a nice thing to do to take somebody to their comfortable place because you know how much they like it, or sitting with their, comfort figure, whatever that would be. I think when we did with Nilda, I think you were with your small self, like however it feels for you at the end, like, do you need more? And if it looks like the person, is still, say they're still activated at a 5 and you brought resources on, it didn't come down, you're going to put it in the container, but then you would go to comfortable place or go to one of the other resources. I don't think there's any like a hard and fast rule that you have to use one or the other, but they're different things. Like you can't put yourself in the container or parts of yourself in the container, but comfortable place, that's just the person, the person there where they feel just okay. So that's the only thing I would say is you want to keep them separate because they are separate. But I wouldn't tell you which, I mean, if you have open material, the container makes the most sense. But sometimes if you're processing and you get to a point where, you look at you have like 15 minutes left, you might pull on a protector figure, even if the person doesn't want it, and say, or your adult self, bring your adult self in, bring the kid to the present, whether you put, your heart or, wherever they want to be. And bring them back to the present and put the rest of the stuff away. I mean, because a lot of people, that I work with, I could be doing EMDR with them for, 6 days in a row and still not still not be done. So, I mean, when you think here's a hub and it's connected to all these associated memories, sometimes you're putting them away, and sometimes you can bring on a resource, but it's the next time they come in, that resource didn't cure it, I find. I think Laurel Parnell says that she'll bring she'll bring a resource on and say, okay, it's over, right? So, and it's over, and that hasn't worked as well as I had hoped, right? So I think it's really depends on the person.
Kelly, your patient really reminded me a lot of somebody that Jen and I have been working with. So I've been working with her for almost 3 years now, specifically just doing EMDR. So I feel like I failed. It's been 3 years and she's still not healed. But she's come a long way. I mean, she's definitely, certainly the person I started working with 3 years ago has transformed. I've only been doing, I guess you would call it unrestricted EMDR, right? So following the protocol and kind of going wherever she goes.
Mm-hmm.
She started with basically being a head. She was super disconnected from her body. And now there is more of a connection. But the one thing I can't seem to be penetrating that always comes back and comes back full force, I call it her gremlins, like I am a loser. I am, and in more explicit terms. And when this happens, when it gets really escalated because a relationship has come in and once again it failed her, I want to kill myself. So it's even after 3 years of sort of feeling like it's been successful, there's still that. So I have tried to do more of the restricted EMDR in terms of reintroducing and reinforcing the container and how to keep herself more grounded in between sessions when thoughts come up. The comfortable place, we bring that up. The triumphant self has been incredibly difficult because
it's hard to remember.
She won't come up with anything, and recently she did come up with something, and just like in the past 2 weeks, I tried, but I feel really stuck.
If you mention that we're sharing this patient, we did DBT with her. She's been with us forever. And I think there's also this piece of unrelenting grieving for the life she didn't get to have. From a life, she's been obese most of her life. She's lost 165 pounds in the last year and a half with weight loss medicine. So suddenly she's like out in the world, which is why a relationship, I guess, is happening. But I think an important piece here is that she didn't get married, she didn't have children. She's so angry that she didn't get to live. And she has spent, I think, so if she's 52, she's really spent 30 years, 25 years, being morbidly obese, not engaging in the world. In many ways, she's functioning better than she ever has, except now the weight is off, and she still cannot get past the fact that she needs to find her person. And if she doesn't find her person, she's going to kill herself because she's just not going to live. She's not willing to live alone anymore. And between the two of us, so Nilda does the EMDR, and I yell at her to stop wanting to kill herself, and we're tremendously successful.
Well,
It's
she's
really
still alive, so there has been.
It's Wagovi. I mean, the two of
she's
I don't
actually
know.
thriving. I think she's
Yeah.
thriving way more
In
than she
some
ever
ways.
has.
But
In
she
some
also
ways,
wants
yeah.
to kill herself in August because that's a date.
A date of what?
She
Every
has
year.
2 months. She has 2 months a year where she gives herself permission to kill herself because it's nobody's birthday in her family, and that's March and August. She's been chronically suicidal for her whole life since she's 15. The trauma of being chronically suicidal and not developing resources to, when you said you need to have like a self to be able to use skills or to self-soothe in between sessions. I don't know, Nilda, what you think about that.
Well, I think there's something to be said for somebody that has those kind of suicide, there's a plan. And I think somebody needs to say, congratulations for having a plan, because that's the only thing that keeps her alive that's for a lot of people. It's the only thing that keeps them alive is that parachute, that I can get out of here if I need to get out of here. And I don't think taking that away is going to be helpful. I think that I would say, you came up with 2 months, and I was thinking that maybe what you should do, Jen or Nilda, is, do you have birthdays in that month?
Me?
Oh, yeah. You're March. I can pretend to be August. Who cares?
We got to find somebody in August, right? But or just, take yours off the table because she knows you long enough, and then try to find somebody. I go through August and let her keep August. I would say a suicide plan is fine to have, and it's a parachute plan. And I think people should say something to the effect of, without taking your right away to kill yourself, can we work on X, Y, or Z and palliate some of these symptoms and see if you still want to do it in 3 weeks or in
and that's kind of what I've been doing. Like, I haven't been touching the suicidal stuff because I know Jen has been dealing with it. So I've been doing what you're saying. I've just been forging on, and okay, this is here. I get it. And what can we do to alleviate what's happening in between to get you there? That's kind of like the work I've been doing with her.
Yeah, because we all have that option. I'm not sure if everybody knows it.
I've never said that. I love that. I love to say that's an option, right? Like,
I just told her this week she can always kill herself later, but like, go travel the world, go do the stuff.
What's my culture is, you're a short time living and a long time dead. So once you're dead, you suck at therapy. You're no good anymore in therapy. So it's really, if she has hope, or she wouldn't be coming to see both of you. So there's hope somewhere. So you're linking with that hope and saying, look, nobody's trying to take your option to off yourself. You can always, everybody can kill themselves. You wake up in the morning, everybody has that, the same thing with self-injury. I tell the story all the time. I had a client that was in 5-point leather restraints, and she found a way to hurt herself. People are going to do what they're going to do. And it's not our job to throw ourselves in front of them so they don't. It's our job to hold the hope of, can you hold on, and as we palliate some of these symptoms, or you get better at these things you want to get better at, and see what happens then. Because like Jen just said, you always have that option. It's not going away, right? Even if you say, I think relationally is the only way to handle suicide, right? I honestly do. I think it's, okay, so I know you for 3 years, and you're going to off yourself without talking to me. I'm not having it. Like, I won't have it. That's unacceptable to me. If you're going to kill yourself, which you have the right to kill yourself, I demand that you talk to me first. I'm not saying you can't kill yourself. I'm saying you can't kill yourself without saying goodbye to me. And I think that that's a relational way to handle it. I don't think you hear a lot of people saying, oh, that's what you should do, but that's what I do because that's how it is for me. You know, it's like, okay, if I have a relationship with somebody for that long, it's going to fucking hurt if you die. And that's, you know, you have to understand that you matter, right? You matter to me. And that's, you know, what do you mean you matter to me? Like, that's the, what? Like, no, that's not going to affect anybody. And you have to really go to who is it going to affect? And if it's going to affect you, tell them. You know, I don't do good with suicide.
So then how do you, getting back to sort of like in the session, like when they've sort of come undone? In the past, I've just gone into what do you want to work on today? And just kind of ignored sort of like the come undone, like the I am all of, and made her focus on processing something through. It seems to have helped because I mean she's made a lot of changes, but now I feel like I know all these restricted practices that you've shared with us, and I'm wondering if I should sort of how to incorporate more of them, and particularly when someone's resistant to them, you know, what do you?
Well, what do you mean resistant?
In the last session, she was just crying in like her head, and I literally had to. I screamed at her. I'm like, stop. Yeah, and I was like, whoa, I can't believe I just did that because I usually don't do that. And ended up more talking to her than I think what I did was I tried to do some, I guess, the event that really upset her. I did some sets around just helping her go through it and seeing it. And what could she have done, like where she saw things differently. That did help. And then she went right back to, I'm a loser, I'm never going to meet anybody.
I think that neural network, if anybody that has like early trauma and often trauma, you have different neural networks that are going to get activated at different times. And she probably has this that negative cognition of I'm a loser across so many of them. What I think I would do is, like you're saying, like you brought her through that last thing that happened. So something that, and you bring her through so she gets some insight. I don't think insight's the most helpful piece. I think it's, do you want to do it different the next time? Because the next time means there's a future. By the way, that's what you're saying. You're saying, do you have an opportunity to try this a different way? And again, could you just put off suicide until we see if these things work? You know, and I think that that's fair because the person's showing up for 3 years, right? She has a relationship with both of you. And I say you always, always use the relationship because people don't realize how much they matter, you know, and, you know, say, oh, you're a therapist, you're not supposed to love her like your clients. It's nonsense. We're people and we have relationships, and in relationships, we love them, or fond of them, or, you know, I can't stand this person, but I do love her. I want her to be alive. You know, whatever it is, you're allowed to have those feelings, right? But you also can leverage the relationship against suicide because it's what keeps people alive or other people, you know?
And then what, Linda? Like, do you want to do it differently and then go through it again? And
right. How would you do it? How would you do it differently? Or how would somebody that didn't feel like a loser, how would they have gone about it? Do you know anybody that you don't think is a loser?
And would you do EMDR with them around that? Would you do some
the whole thing, behavioral rehearsal of how would you like to do it differently? Yeah. Have you ever seen it done differently? And if somebody sees it done differently, that means you just opened up a neural network that's going to connect now to this, to her, right? So there's information that she didn't have at the time, or all the times before. Now she has information to try it differently. And then really, because what you're doing is you're asking somebody, look, I'm going to give you some skills, see if they work. I don't know if they're going to work perfectly for you. See if they work and see if it makes it any better. Because that's what we're saying about how can we palliate? How can we see if we can make it better for you? Do you still want to kill yourself? Because it is an option. I mean, I don't want to be like Pollyanna about this. It's an option. People can kill themselves, and they do. So it's more of how do you leverage your relationship or the relationships they have already, whether it's with a dog, whether it's with a career, whether it's with, you know, a person.
It's an interesting idea so Nilda and I were on my first ever DBT team together. We go back a very long time. And this patient has brought us together in ways that nothing else could, which is interesting. I wish we could find a way to use our love and respect for each other somehow. But I'm wondering,
you two together?
That's a brilliant idea.
That's an interesting thing. If we did a Zoom together, the three of us,
Yeah, and it's more of not for splitting. It's more of, well,
No.
there's two people right here that care a great deal about whether you
Mhm.
live or die.
Powerful.
And there's three of us here, and there's only two of us that really give a shit. But there's a part of you that cares too, or you wouldn't be here.
We're reparenting her the best that we can. I mean, we both speak to her all weekend long on a group chat and whatever. I'm wondering though, if Milda, if it makes sense to then tap in some skills, especially I'm thinking distress tolerance, the idea that she can feel badly without going into this.
Right.
I always think that she does
Mhm.
chutes and ladders and that she falls down the chute. I always tell her that. She just falls down these chutes. And is there a way to almost, use a skill? She knows the skills. She's a bright woman, but the emotions take over and then she doesn't give a shit. Pardon my language.
That's very harsh. I don't like that language.
Yeah, that's
Sorry,
tough.
I
But
know.
that- but
Linda in particular with your puritanical ears.
It hurts me. It hurts my heart.
I was just going to say that's where the behavioral rehearsal, where you just say, okay, let's imagine you doing that, but being able to tolerate your emotions. And what would it be like if you ended up at this other? And then buzz, 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 buzz. Close your eyes, just do it. When you get to the end, let's open your eyes and tell me how it went. And then let them do that. And say, and it's either it went really well. Wow, I never really thought of that. Oh, that good thing. Let's tap that in. Or it might be, you know what, I got stuck right here where I always do. Oh, interesting. You got stuck right there. And then you can work with that.
You
I
say,
mean,
what do you need? What do you need at that point? And then I
yes.
need, I need to hear your voice saying that this is temporary or whatever, whatever would be helpful for that person.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what,
And then when you get that, then say, all right, so now let's try it with that piece of information. And so you're sort of helping them shape the behavior imaginally. And if she needs any help, you could use all the sports metaphors about, you have to see where the ball's going to go before you throw it there or whatever it is. But you're creating your neural net to be able to get this outcome that you really want. And doing that. And I do that all the time with clients, especially in dating. It's funny you talk about this. I'll just say, go on the date. You're just doing data collection. That's what it is. Good date, bad date. We don't know, maybe the last time you see them. Just come back then on Tuesday and tell me how it went. And then and they tell, oh, you got here. All right. So let's now, like I said, let's do a do-over, or let's imagine doing it the way you want to. Or how is it that you want to send the text saying you want to just put them in the friend zone? Imagine doing that text, whatever it is, but it's really a great opportunity to sort of focus on a specific skill with alternating bilateral stimulation and giving them that experience. And they could even have imaginal triumph experience at doing it correctly. And that might make it better and easier for them to do it correctly IRL, when you're not there.
I just had one quick question, just for clarification related to that. When you say you're doing BLS, is it slow or fast with the processing?
I always say whatever for the client, whatever they want.
Okay, so it doesn't matter whether
Yeah.
I want to go on record saying that I think a lot of that is just hocus pocus. I mean,
Nonsense.
it just depends on what the client's nervous system is that they walked in with that day. If they came in like a machine gun vibrating off their chair, chances are you don't want to make it faster. Chances are they need to be slowed down.
Or you can start it faster and bring it down. I mean, there's no right answer, Angela. We're going to give you about 50 different answers, and it's because there's 50 different clients in front of us, right?
Yep.
So that's what it is. And people say, oh, 10 to 12 of these. Well, that's because your arm gets tired after 12. They're all just office policy nonsense things. It's like what works for the person in front of you. And if you have some reason to believe that doing it slow is going to be helpful, ask them if it was helpful. Like do it slow and say, is this helpful? Or let's try it a little faster, see if we like this. I mean, it really is about the client preference, and the client state. That's what you're saying. It's what
Totally.
state they come in. And again, if somebody comes in and they're up here, you don't start with, hey, baby. You start, what? A lot happened. Like I always say that, like the nervous system with an infant, like they're crying or they're really activated, you got to go in and go up in affect and come down with them, So you may have to start high and then bring it down. I think that's fine too. You hear that with the heart rate all the time too. If you're using auditory, like any of these meditations that you do, they have the heart rate set at 100 and they bring it down to 60 over the course of it, which is really just, it's interpersonal, you're the interpersonal biological regulator at that point, listening to the heart rate that's bringing your heart rate down.
Something that stuck out to me while you were talking about it was the identity piece. And I wonder if working on how she is now and how her identity has changed since this massive weight loss would be positive, and then using that guided imagery to like talk to that former self, because I know a lot of times with losing weight, it's that guilt and shame. And so having her go back and talk to that version of herself and like talking her through that, kind of like Nildy did with her younger self. But then also the triumphant self of like she's living it every day, that she's not gaining it back. Like that is a huge triumph, that she lost all that weight and she's keeping it off. So
And does anybody notice that both Nilda and Jennifer, both of them have that like, oh no, that won't work, that won't work. And I think that she projects that right onto them, where it's like, hold on a minute, why won't it work? Because she said it wouldn't work. Well, maybe it didn't work Tuesday. Maybe you have to say it differently, or maybe
We
you
have
have
to
to
say it
know it. And
differently.
I actually think I was agreeing. I think it
Yeah, no, me too.
can
I just
work.
think she's so initially cruel to her former fat self
So
that it would take a lot. If she can do it, we'll do it. Well, whatever, we'll get there. But and I think that her initial conversation with her prior, I'm just going to call her prior fat self, because that's how she would think of it, would be unrelentingly
I would
abusive
do
and
that in a
cruel.
heartbeat, Jen. I would do that with her in a heartbeat, because what it's going to be is, how did she save you? How did being heavy keep people away? How was that safe
Oh.
for you?
yes.
You know, how all of those things. I mean, all the parts of self are in service of the self, and you can't say, "Oh, your former fat self." No, that's part of you, right? And that's a part of you that was trying to save you from more heartache. Right? You know, if she had sexual abuse, if she had physical abuse, whatever it is, you get real big so nobody bothers you. You know, you're not a sexual being. And I think probably losing this weight is going to bring up those kind of issues,
Mhm.
you know, of sex. And I think you have to talk about that too. And how, you know, how do you want to be seen, you know, when it's going to be, you know, like people see you now more as a sexual being. How is that for you? You know, how is that going to be? What, like, how will you be different or the same in these relationships? It's a big deal. You know, I mean, that's like Vincent Felitti. That's why he did the ACE study, is because he did that study in weight, right? And so people 400 to 600 pounds, when they started losing weight, they either picked up another habit or they dropped out of the program, right? Because it did something for them. And rather than saying your fat self, how about that? How about the self that put on all that weight to save you from what?
The intense self-hatred.
Really?
I can't help her get past. She's happy with her weight loss. She still doesn't think she just hates herself so much that her belief is, until I meet someone who accepts me, I am nobody.
Nilda, I mean, have you used some of the sort of IFS or ego state questions about bringing curiosity to the part of it? Like how is it helpful to hate yourself in that way, or I'm curious about what it, how it might serve you or your system to, I don't know, just to sort of uh, give a little objectivity, like that this is really more a symptom, or this is real, without saying it, this is really more like a defense. Maybe it's been very useful. Sometimes people will say, well, if I don't keep myself on my toes by hating myself, if I get lax, then something else is going to happen. So sort of those things, without feeding it to her, but just to sort of be curious about, that part of you that keeps saying. And I was thinking that earlier about the suicide piece too, which is another thing that I'll do, which I'll say, I totally understand that part of you wants to kill yourself. That's so useful. That's so helpful to you to have that part. And I know that that's an escape valve, and that's so valuable. And that really makes it feel, it gives you confidence that you can get through because you have that option. But, knowing that that's just a part of self, what about, your most high self, or in this moment, whatever it is, just to sort of continue to start giving them that language of parts, and that these are defenses or systems, pieces of a system, rather than this is me, or this is my truth, as though that exists.
I'm wondering if we can reframe the eating and the food addiction as some way that she was trying to feed herself. She was trying to, even though it was very abusive, but she was trying to give something to herself.
It's soothing, self-soothing.
Well, I have a question. What's the attachment system? Her primary caretaker. I mean, it's all about nourishment. You can't take in nourishment, or you take it all in and it's violent, right? I mean, always.
Mom was absent, depressed, just absent, not. I don't hear that she was much of a substantive person.
when she cried, she would feed her. She
Oh, I
always
didn't know
had to
that.
be around. Oh yeah,
Oh,
we've
well, there you
done
go.
that.
Right.
Yep.
And I think that
No.
part of that is, okay, so you interjected that part of, okay, if I don't know what to do, I throw food on it, right? What else is soothing? I mean, because the mother
Yeah.
didn't have the ability to do it, but I don't think you two are reparenting her. I think what your job is to develop a parent within her. When your mother fed you because you were hungry, right? That's one thing. But then when you were hungry for affection or hungry for like stimulation, she fed you too. So that's really, there's an interject of that, right? That's all you do is throw food on it, and what it does is puts people in coma, kind of, right? So it sedates you, and it's like, really, but I think Kate said that last time about, like, oh, there's a skinny person inside of me, but I keep throwing Oreos on it to sedate it. Right. That part, it's more, it's like, it is that. It's like that I don't want this part to come up because I don't know what to do with it. And she didn't have there was no experience of, oh, you're interested in this, or, oh, no, this is the only thing I know. And I think I'm nurturing you, but mange, right? I think I'm nurturing you, but it's violent. It's violent in the amount of food and how much a baby can hold. It's easy to see where it comes from, but it's how does she keep that up, and does she want to keep doing it? Because I mean, it's just to know, you have to bring shit into awareness before people have a choice in it, right?
And again, I know we're spending a lot of time in this case, but I think it's actually very useful when you stop doing a behavior that worked so well to to sort of self-soothe or to regulate emotionally. So whenever that happens, I'm always curious about, what do you do for when you get stressed now? How are you self-soothing now? And either and if those are negative behaviors in whatever way, okay, can we do buzzkill to sort of unpair that and substitute a more positive behavior? So that's a restricted EMDR sort of technique there, or if it's all good stuff that she's doing, my God, resource, right? I mean, you're really tapping that in and making that like such a great thing, that and giving her the so that she starts to say to herself after she goes for the bike ride or she goes for the walk or whatever it is, I did something really loving for myself today. Good job, you.
My mom didn't have the capability.
Yeah.
It's not a blame. It's my mother didn't have the capacity to do this, but I've seen it done well in other places, or there are other things that are soothing. My mother didn't know them, but I can learn them.
What Linda said before about having people realize that they're going to be parenting themselves, I think is such a revolutionary thought to so many people who did not get the parenting that they needed, and either are still mourning that and just in the sort of younger state of it's not fair, and I'm going to die this way, or I'm going to find the magical person who will do it for me. Maybe, but it's really so much more about redirecting them to, but look at what we could do in you. Like you can be that, and that's as we're introducing younger self and having the today's self speak to younger self, or having them give them a little tour of their current life. Them beginning to have a relationship with their parts in that way, so that they really get, oh no, actually, I'm the one who is going to be able to, in that moment, talk myself down and remind myself it's going to be okay. I've gotten through a lot worse than this.
Yeah, the distress piece of it is, can you imagine your mother who didn't have the capacity, when you were in distress, the only thing she knew was to feed you. Can you go back to that moment and think, what do you think a baby could have wanted besides food? Right. And it's always good, it's going to be like, I want to see the outside and all of those things you can do now. Right. But I mean, you're kind of just giving people some, you give somebody the prompt, there's this prompt, and you let them go where they go with it. But the prompt really is, what do you think a baby would need? Because your mother only knew the baby needed food. What else would a baby need? God.
I think because I've been doing EMDR by the book for so long, I hesitate. Because I've all these conversations, I've had them all with her. What I haven't done is I haven't tapped them in.
Yeah, there you go.
And that's what's missing. And I don't know how to do that, because she doesn't do the tapping, or she does the it's an app. So she uses the app to do the eye movements.
Okay.
I hate that.
I don't like it either.
I think the tapping or the third tapper is because people can close their eyes and do that with if you have their eyes open and they're watching you watch them, that's harder for people, I think.
The eye one is really, I think it's fine when you're doing the protocol, like from start to finish, but when it's more incorporating it, it gets in my way.
Yeah, so that's where, yeah, more and more people who are using these sort of resourcing or restricted or imaginal things, eyes closed at least is cutting out part of, the sensory input so they can go more to an imaginal place, right?
So you would
So
just basically stop. Okay, we'll tap it in.
yeah, this is a great opportunity. You know what? That's amazing. Let's tap that in.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay.
That's 5 words. And you've
Thank you.
cued them to do this work. Okay, fantastic. All right, now let's go back to what you're, whatever it is. But yeah, just get them used to that. Great, let's tap that in. Great. Oh, that's good. Oh, let's try something now, right? We're just going to do this for 30 seconds. Let's try this.
Wonderful.
No,
Thank you.
I think we can actually tell her. I've been thinking about it, obviously, that you and I went to a conference this weekend about
Yeah, I'll
EMDR,
take it
and we
down.
have some great ideas, and we're going to shift a
I've
little
already
bit.
incorporated some of this. I just haven't done it
I
consistently.
think a hard shift, like we're just going to
Yeah.
start doing this a little bit differently.
Thank you.
No, and to ask, I would ask her to say, look, we talked to a few people, we did some consultation on you because you matter. And these are some of the things
Exactly.
these are some of the things that came up. What appeals to you, if anything? And because that's the agency piece of it, is she knows what she needs. She doesn't know she knows what she needs, right? But we all do in some way. We all know what was missing, right? She keeps saying she needs this one person, right? And so if that person doesn't show up, she's going to kill herself. But that person is her. I mean, that's what we were talking
And I
about.
have said that, but it's just, yeah.
Have
she's
you
not
tapped
ready
it in,
for
though? Have you tapped it
The
in?
idea
the
is you can have all these ideas conceptually, and Jen, you and I know this, but better than most people, right? You can have it conceptually, but until you have it experientially, it's not helpful. It's like, okay, I know it, but I know why I feel like shit. I have the insight of I feel like shit, and I'm always going to feel like shit. And I'm going to kill myself, or I'm going to have this magical person appear and take care of me. There isn't a magical person. Right? There's not going to be, I mean, if she gets in a relationship, it's going to be an interdependent relationship, and you want it to be as healthy as possible, but you can't do it when you're saying, oh, I am putting my life in your hands, right? Because if you fail me, I'm going to kill myself. Who wants to be in that relationship? That's a bit fraught.
been very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have your hand up, Cal?
I hear you guys trying to end this, but just to continue.
I don't want to end this. These are the
I
people
just
we're
think this is
talking
so-
about.
And I'm thinking about, my client as well, but, what Gerard said, that's what I was thinking about, the IFS piece. It just seems like something that's so, it just lends itself so well, just helping her develop, almost needing to have the direct access and helping her develop the compassion for this younger self. And I'm wondering, this is not something I've tried, so I'm wondering if it seems like it would make sense, but helping her get to that space. And I'm wondering if this is something that then could be tapped in, maybe bringing up her nurturing figure, or imagining her adult self comforting that young self
Totally.
that only
All
had
day
food
long.
to comfort all day long.
All day long. Absolutely. With tapping. I mean, that is that's
There's
what
also a piece that you want to say that they were pretty clear that she doesn't have a whole lot of compassion for herself. So I think that probably what it is has anybody ever felt compassion for you? And probably the two of you will come up for her, but is there anybody else? Right. That's the only thing I'm saying, because it sounds like there's all contempt for the quote unquote fat self, but that fat self is the part that saved her. So I don't, I think it's more of saying, okay, how do you meet these parts? Even if you're angry with these parts, how do you meet them and find out what their job was, why they did what they did?
Well, and it's a child trying to nurture a child.
But also, Linda, at our training, when I went off the rails, you had me think of a younger child who wasn't myself.
correct.
And she has nieces who she loves.
Perfect.
And I think that would be the way to go, because I at least to start to develop, to access that experience.
All you need is that neural network, you know?
It's
they're not ready to nurture themselves yet. So it's just that you just need a neural network of nurture.
Yeah. So it would be that image, if I'm following, that image of her nurturing how she nurtures her nieces.
Yes. And what's that like? And imagine that, and let's just tap it in. And because it'll take time before she'll be able to get to it. But I have a client who just is not a big fan of his 5-year-old self, just because of how he's sort of taken in the the stories about that 5-year-old self, and how he's been taught to sort of that he was too sensitive or he was this or that and all this language. He's 63 now. And but he does have a 2-year-old son now that he never had before. And so doing developmental work while they're having kids and they're behaving in a completely different way than their parents did to them. So having him imagine talking to or taking on, having the relationship with his son. And then sometimes we'll be like, what would it be like to bring your younger self in with the 3 of you? And how would that go? Or can you imagine your younger son being friends with, your younger self, or whatever it is, in a way that he can start to see that these feelings that he has for his son, this incredible love that he has, can it sort of shift over to his younger self as well? And he knows why that's important. But as Linda was saying before, until he has the felt sense, it's all up here. I know I should do that, but I still hate the little mother. Sorry, the little terrible me. So giving him various imaginal opportunities to be able to start to feel that way, to feel that welling up of love for himself the way he does for his own son, again, with bilateral stimulation, with imagination, is a great gift. And it's practice. It's not going to happen in one time.
The thing about the nieces with your client, Jen, is really that, like, if she knew them when they were babies, what else did they need?
She hated them. She hated them and resented them when they were babies because she didn't have babies. So part of our work, Nilda and I, but probably my part more, was learning how to love small children, her nieces and her nephew, because prior to then she has hated everyone's babies because she didn't have one.
There might be more to that too, of it's not just that she hated babies because she didn't have one. She hated babies, but she resents the fact that people got cared for and she didn't. That's what I was thinking with this. What else do babies need? You could do that with they don't just need food, right? That's not it, right? I mean, people need touch more than they need food. We're mammals. That's just period, So talking about touch, you're talking about curiosity, talking about games, things that she might know from the niece. I think that
she does, yeah.
Yeah, so you can feed, you got to feed them, period, right? Because that's going to be something you have to say, like, always with food, you can't take that off the table. Food is something that you need, that's going to be sustenance, so it's going to be a problem for her. She lost 160 pounds, right? That's going to come up as an issue. But I think if you go back to saying, okay, well, what do kids need? And we'll just be real clear that your mother didn't have the capacity to do this for you due to depression or whatever. Again, not blame, just whatever, didn't have the capacity. But what do you think your nieces did need? And what do you think they would have gotten out of that had they, had your mother been able to point, say like, oh, take it to the park and meet other kids, or, do crafts with you and those kind of things that maybe she did with her nieces. And, if not, we really do know that tamping down that attachment need to say, oh, I need the perfect person to come and take care of me. I mean, it has to really be, no, there is none, right? And as an adult, it is our job to take care of ourselves. And again, the reparenting, I don't think it's a bad thought. I just think that it misses the mark on what we're doing with adults, because we're not going to become their parent. They're going to become their parent. Sorry.
And so would we tap in her imagining doing crafts, let's just say, with her younger self?
Well, what I would ask is to kind of do kind of what Gerard said, is more of, do you remember what your nieces needed when they were young? I know they needed food. Did you ever feed them? Yes. Did they ever need anything besides food? I'm saying
she plays with them now.
Well, this is what I'm saying, right? I mean, what else do children need? They don't just need food. And could you imagine yourself just keep feeding your nieces? That's all you do, because it's the only thing you know to do. Do you know anything else that would be needed here? And what is it? It's being with other kids, it's relationships, it's playing, it's curiosity, it's learning, it's all the things we're motivated to do. I mean, she'll come up with them. I mean, there's not like she doesn't have any idea, but she has to come up with them and bring them in imaginally for her to have an experience of it. And like kind of the lemon experiment that we do with everybody. It's like when the mind tells you this is what's happening, the body responds as if, but the mind doesn't respond to a concept, right? It's like, that's just an insight. The mind, it's like the body doesn't go into, oh, let me be in fight flight because I just thought of, oh, there's that disaster means I should be in fight flight. That doesn't happen, right? But if I think of the time when I was in fight flight and it comes up, my body goes into it because my mind's telling it it's happening. Hands are up. Look at this. Go ahead.
Something that I was thinking about while you guys were talking is like, instead of only just focusing on the younger self with like what they needed, could you incorporate like almost like the empty chair and like forgiving of the self like that was at that point, like really focusing on that self-hatred of like forgiving the version of herself that constantly was eating and constantly was like getting her to that point.
I know what you're saying, and I think that she's not ready for that particular thing, but I think you'll get to that. I absolutely do, because I mean, it's the part of self that really, like, you know, when you say the angry part of self or whatever, I mean, these are the hardest working parts, right? I mean, they're what kept her safe and alive, all of the parts, you know, and you can say, oh, I hate this part of me, or, you know, my therapist don't like that about that suicidal part of me. Tough. They're all parts, and they're, you know, they're all in service of the self, and she can't stay alive. Right now, she can't stay alive without having that option of taking her life. Most of my clients had that at some point. And eventually, could they see their younger self? Yes, eventually. I mean, most of the people that I work with, you know, get over the contempt for the younger self that couldn't make it stop, or couldn't be perfect, or couldn't do what was needed to make the parent be okay. You know, and so it's like eventually they get there, but I think it seems to me that trying to start with that might be a much harder sell than these other kind of things because I don't know. I think that people don't really look at it in terms of like the suicidal self they're ashamed of, or the part that hurts themselves they're ashamed of. They don't think of them as the hardworking parts. And I think that when you give them the credit they deserve, I think that people are able to see, oh yeah, like I don't know what I would have done without that. Yeah.
If this feels useful, Nilda and Jennifer, you said only a little bit about her mom, but you know, there's been a lot of focus on like she wasn't capable, and she wasn't capable of so much. It sounds like she was so incredibly depressed, and the client's looking for this wonderful nurturer. I'm wondering if there's another side of that coin, that for the client to maybe hear the idea that how important was she to her mother, that her mother was so incredibly depressed. She couldn't do anything, but she made it a priority to at least give her food.
And that's what she thought was the answer. Again, it's capacity. Yeah, this is what I can do. I can't.
But that she was that important to her. Instead of that she was a loser, she was that important to her that she at least tried.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Also, this is super weird, but last year, I think, she got a mouse in her apartment or house or whatever. And her mom, I have this photograph she sent that her mom came over, who's, you know, 90, with a broom and stayed up all night waiting to find and kill the mouse, which I can't remember if she did or not, but it was like it was such
tap that
like,
in.
Yeah, right. You know what I'm talking about, right?
And that would be very restricted, because you don't want to get back to all the stuff she wasn't able to do.
Right. But she was a protector. She came in the middle of the night, and that's how valuable she is. That's how loved she is in that circumstance, and just really strengthen that neural groove, or that neural network.
I love this. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I think these are all things that I think we're supposed to be doing with one another, like, because we get stuck with like, oh, there's something that I'm not doing, or I'm missing something. And I don't think that's usually it. It's that we take on what the client feels, right? That's the projective identification of it's never going to be okay. Anything that you say is not going to help. And I don't think that's true. I just think that we you know, like we get, okay, well, she's been doing this for a long time. 3 years is not a long time. I mean, if you had early trauma, right, and you didn't have an attachment figure to go to, you have a lot of skills that you didn't build, you know, and childhood needs that don't get met become adult needs. That's not infantilizing people. It's saying, you know, in order to be an adult and be a high functioning adult and get what you want, you need these skills.
And I just want to add, I mean, and I know we keep saying it, but for all of you who have the inclination to want to sort of be innovative in these ways, but just keep feeling like, no. In my training, it was very clear, you must do it in this order, and it's got to be this many, and this many back and forth with my finger and all. Again, there are reasons for that. You know, you have to learn your scales first before you can play the concerto or be a jazz musician. We're sort of now saying, you know, these are all useful elements, and don't be afraid to act on this, or certainly to add alternating bilateral stimulation. I mean, I don't think that's ever killed anyone. You know, being facetious, but I mean, there are plenty of.
Because it probably has.
Maybe it has, but there are plenty of studies, you know, that could be shared where just looking at alternating bilateral stimulation with positive imagery really does have neurobiological, a benefit. So why not give that to the client, for sure. So these are just all things that you can and should be doing. And by all means, go do all the standard protocol when you're doing them, when you've got everybody pretty well resourced and you want to move the heavy furniture and do the whole unrestricted thing, do it. But there's so much more ways we can help people get prepared for that and give them resources that they're going to use, in between sessions, which is also so great. Hopefully they're not doing unrestricted memory reprocessing between sessions, but what they can be using is Fiero, or they can be using Peaceful Plays, or they can be using, any of these things in between sessions, just because they just take it on the way they would, watching a TikTok video and then suddenly, doing thought stopping or something that they never thought about before.
Just in terms of what the mouse situation, I mean, she's incredibly difficult person and wonderful. I love her. She has so much inner strength as well. But I remember the mouse situation, and I tried to capitalize on some of that, but all she saw herself as was a loser because she had to have her mom come in with her. And I remember trying really hard to figure out, how do you kind of turn that around? And then I remember okay, what do you want to work on today? Because that wasn't what she was. She was a loser because her mother had to come and get rid of this mouse for her. So even something that is such a protector could be really something to use. I, as a therapist, get stuck about how to.
You don't get stuck. You get caught in her thinking rather than having more of an objective view, right? So she's saying she's a loser. There's really an opportunity for you to say, so anybody that, calls somebody to help them get a mouse out of their house is a loser, right? That's what you're saying. No, I'm a loser. Okay. I mean, there's ways to pull in what Kelly said too, but I mean, I think you have to just say, okay, to explain that to me. Like, so anybody that calls a exterminator, they're losers, right? I mean, those kind of things are just reframes, and that's just cognitive therapy. But what is underneath that? I mean, the loser has to go through all of those, early things. And so that negative cognition should come up a lot. And I think, well, to be able to at least address it cognitively, like that is a reframe. You could do that. And what else could you have done? You could do a behavioral, be like a behavioral rehearsal of what else could you have done if you wanted to do something yourself. What would that look like? And practice that. I really liked what Kelly said about the mother, because people don't want to give. I mean, I could say this for myself. Early in therapy, it was like I resented the shit out of the fact that I had to do all this work. I had to do all this work when nobody else was doing work. So I see the fact of resenting. No, why she's taking care of me now? Fuck her. Why didn't she take care of me when I was done? I needed to be taken care of. Like, there's a lot of different things that come up, but I think, you hand them the TheraTapper and say, okay, well, how would you have done it differently? If you weren't a loser, right? I mean, and I'll do the same thing. If you weren't a loser, what would you have done? Because I think really that goes through people's filter, right? Marsha Linehan, your hero and mine. She's irreverent for a reason, right? She's irreverent because it gets under the filter. Right. So people, it's like, okay, yeah. So what would, if you weren't a loser, what would you have done with this mouse? If you were a winner, what would you have done? Like, I think it can kind of go any way with it. Again, it's not like somebody has the right answer. It's how is she getting you stuck? She's hitting something in you, and again, you think 3 years, you should have healed her. I heard you say that first. And first off, if you think you're healing people, you're no mystic or a saint. We're setting conditions, and people can only heal as much as they can heal, right? And again, when she gets you, you have to go back to your triumphant self when you get a letter from a client or something like that. Remember that some things don't work, period. Like, sometimes you go, oh, I'm going to try this, and it goes poorly, and you go, wow, that really went poorly. I mean, I say to the client, oh, that didn't go how I wanted it to go. What about you? Nope. Let's do something else, And again, you're using the relationship. You have 3 years of you being there and being trustworthy and stable. I would say the words, being somebody that's a stable force. So that's, that has been working with her. And if it doesn't go well, that's just part of the relationship. Sometimes it doesn't go well. No, I don't think that you do anything wrong. I think that you just have to remember that they're not going to get better because the DSM or the insurance company says that they should be better in X amount of time, right? I mean, she's done a lot of things in those 3 years, including like lose 160 pounds. But I would think of all the other things that she's done. I would really go through that with her. Look, I'm starting to be convinced that you are a loser. You're starting to convince me of this. So can we go through all the things that you've done in the last 3 years that make you a loser? And then you can bring in the positive ones. And again, it's just cognitive dissonance, that you're bringing it into and saying like, okay, so loser, your definition of that would be somebody who takes it upon themselves to do X, Y, and Z, all the good things that she did, right? You said that she was not the one, yours was one with the masters, right, Cal? But whatever she did in the last 3 years that you think is progress, I think you have to present her with, because those are the things that people forget all the time, and including therapists, right?
She started to lose it because her medication was going to be taken away for weight management. And I did a lot of work with her on all the other things she's done besides medication. And that's when the triumph and self came in, by the way. That's when she was able to go, I did these things, So thankful to this as well, to kind of like, and I did tap that in, and that was useful.
There's so many things that people don't realize that they've done that were really hard. I mean, there's things that, for people who have a lot of trauma, it's like we can do a lot of things that aren't hard, but like asking somebody if I can sit at your table might be the hardest thing I ever did. And if I do it, it's courageous because I was afraid to do it. And what were the results, right? So it's like we do regular cognitive therapy or DBT skill. That's what you're doing, is you predicted it was going to be terrible, and what was it? Well, it wasn't terrible. They let me sit there, and they didn't seem to want me to leave, right? Tap that in, because that's some evidence now, right? And then you want to get more evidence for it, because what keeps getting lit up is that same I'm a loser. It's the same rut that goes to every single thing. So you have to kind of get some more things in the right hemisphere that people can go to, rather than that same hill, that same that ski rut, whatever we're talking about.
Gerard, when you said tap it in a very restricted way, can you talk a little bit more about?
Oh, I just meant, you want to just have, so if you're resourcing something specifically, you just want to have them tap in the sort of positive, what do you notice in your body? What do you think about yourself when this happens? And then just have them strengthen that, through the tapping in, and just stay there, so you don't make it very long, or you just say, tell me when you're done, if they're doing it with eyes closed, just so that, because, you don't, now with her perhaps, whether she's a fast or a slow processor, but some things, can go sideways quickly. So you just want to make sure we're just doing this, just on this. Let's just strengthen that together, and tell me when you're done. You're done. Okay, how was that?
Useful with that. The container, like when something comes up, okay, let's put it in the container. Like that was the past few sessions, Linda, that we've had around that. That helps when you're doing the restricted. Like if something does come up, she knows to put it in the container.
But I mean, if it's something as simple as just like, she did something amazing and tapped it in. I mean, hopefully you're not getting, I don't know what you're getting. You'd have to also resort to a container. But I guess if it does, sure, you can. Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking with the container, I think that using the container and then really going back to it and saying, you realize what we're doing is you're learning how to be mindful and present where you want to be, right? So that this isn't pulling you away. You're able to contain it and compartmentalize it until you have the resources, to bring that up, whether it's a memory or whether it's, I always say time's a resource, because that's in therapy, you only have so much time to do it. But it's like to say, yeah, you were able to do that, and you said she was able to do it twice. I would tap that in, right? Hey, that you're able to, those are the state shifts, that somebody's able to do something and they have agency to do it. That's what we want. We want them to go home with the skill, not come in to get the skill not to come in and get it from us, right? Once they learn it, right, in relation with us, and then they practice it with that, how did you use it? How was it? How'd it go? And if it didn't go good, let's do a behavioral rehearsal for how what you could have done differently, or how maybe that isn't the right person, or whatever comes up, the kind of thing.
Thank you. I mean, and also I think Nilda and I have to figure out what I'm doing, because part of me feels like she needs to be doing this work, not then coming back to me. I'm not sure. We have to play.
What's she doing with you? Because
I kind of do what are you doing this weekend? How do you make some plans? How do you build a life worth living? I mean, I could tap that stuff in too,
That's
but
what you
Totally.
should be tapping in.
so would you say that we both should?
Absolutely. I think if you're going to do the shift and just say, look, we're doing tag team, or we're doing tap team, whatever you want to call it, and just say that we're going to barrage you with a whole lot of this, and we're going to see how that goes. Because, there's a lot of things that, and I always say this to people, there's a lot of things that I missed, like when you say you made no progress, or you say that you're a loser, like, do I go there? I go, wait a minute, didn't you do this, this, and this? And I haven't, and sometimes I go, oh, well, I didn't remember, because every time you tell me you're a loser, now that gets lit up in my head. Like, why, say, so we're going to, just kind of, I don't think you can say we're doing everything differently. It's going to say, are you willing to try something different? Are you willing to try this for a little bit and see if it changes? Yeah, and see, and see how it is. And I think too, like the container, like some you can put away the suicidal ideation for 10 minutes. You know what I mean? You could do it for the whole session if you want. And I think that's ways to get people to titrate that experience of, it's there. I don't have to perseverate on it. I have this option. I can still stay in this, hour, 10 minutes or whatever, and be here and be present with it. I think those are the best ways to use the resources, or to use them behaviorally, and then to have people take them out. Because I mean, if you're teaching skills and how are you doing it, the behavior, behavioral rehearsal is the best way. I mean, DBT skills are really right to be tapped in. I mean, because they're the ones that are missing for most people.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think that, it's not that you took up time, it's that these are the patients that take up the time. And these are the people that they have the early trauma, right? And so if they have early trauma, you're going to be with them longer, or at least you're going to be with them until they're done that. Like some people do a chunk of therapy and then I want to stop for a while or whatever. And they may come to you because their therapist retired or whatever. And I think that we really have to give it, if you had a lot of trauma and didn't have an attachment figure to regulate you, all of those skills of self-regulation have to be taught. And I think that there's ways that behavioral rehearsal is a real good way to do it. What would you have liked to happen? That's what those worksheets that I sent you. I don't think everybody needs to do the worksheets, but know what's on them, because they're the kind of questions you want to ask the client, right?
And y'all don't think we're messing with this by both of us doing this at the same time?
Well, I think you already have it set up that way, right?
I just haven't done any EMDR with her.
but
you're just doing the restricted. Exactly. You're resourcing these things. So, in our drug treatment program, when we do weekend planning, they're like, I'm going to do this week. That's amazing. Let's tap that in. This is, I mean, these skills that Linda and I are teaching, that we're sort of calling restricted or resourcing, can be done. Let's go out on a limb. By coaches. They could be done by CASEX. They could be done by anybody. I mean, Laurel Parnell wrote tapping in for school teachers and EMTs and parents. These are not so, you don't need to. So absolutely, these can be done in a way, because you're giving her something amazing as she goes into her weekend. So that if she does feel like she did something great, or she made the right choice at that trailhead, maybe over the weekend she could tap that in. Every one of my clients, when they go to the dentist, know that they should be tapping themselves on the side of their knees when they're getting their teeth drilled. I mean, so the more we can introduce these ways of pairing sort of positive thinking, if you will, with alternating bilateral stimulation, let's get everybody doing that.
So some of the reasons that they work, if you have people that are interested in theory, I mean, they're talking about when you do tapping and do alternating bilateral stimulation, there's neurotransmitters, serotonin and dopamine are both secreted at higher rates. Also, when you talk about eye movement, or you talk about tapping on alternate sides, you're talking about integration of the hemispheres, right? I mean, these are, we have some theory behind it, but you also know that imagination is like in every performance that people do, they're using guided imagery to do it. So you're just saying we're using a tapping technique to increase the serotonin, which increases calming, or dopamine, which increases motivation, those kind of things. So all of these things have reasons that you would do them, but the way you're taught EMDR is like, this is the EMDR and everything else is EMDR too. So it's like, so you can't do anything but EMDR because you're an EMDR therapist. So we'll call everything EMDR, which is nonsense, right? You're doing DBT, but when you do DBT skills, it's not just a cognitive thing. You can have them, rehearse, experientially practice them in their imagination. And imagination is the biggest part of all trauma therapy. You two both said something that I think bears repeating about grief. That grief is going to come up, and you have to really say, this is, underneath all the trauma is grief. It's 90% of trauma work is grief work because of what she's lost. So she's not among the minority there. There's a lot of grief for what she didn't have, but there's also a piece that it's like, okay, well, and unless you're done, you still have opportunity to do that. Like you still have we all have, we all start from today, right? And I don't mean that in a, today is the first day of the rest of your life, but I mean, this is all we have. You're not going to change the past, right? But you can change your future. And that's what imagination lets people do. You have a question, Rebecca? Sorry.
With the doing it between sessions, I will teach the parents or have the kids, because I work with kids and teens, I will have them teach the parents about tapping and then have them co-regulate the breathing with them while they do the tapping. And I wonder, because I don't work with adults that often, but I wonder if like your client would have somebody that could help her with that through the week of like, is there somebody where if you are feeling elevated that they could sit with you and help you tap and just do the co-regulating breathing with you to help you calm down?
I think we could make recordings for her. I think
Yeah.
Hilda probably has, right? No?
Or a friend. Yeah. I've made recordings, but there are a few friends I'm thinking about as well. I love that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that you should use your voice, the therapist's voice, because even if you hate it, they love it. I mean, it's connection
Her
back to
though.
safety. It's the transition object, right?
Yes.
Nelda's voice, not mine.
No,
Oh.
yours too, Jen. Any of your
Yours too.
clients, it's yours
Oh,
too.
damn.
Yeah, I mean, your voice, you can hate your voice. It doesn't matter because your voice is now connected to safety or progress or whatever
Okay.
it is, whatever has happened between you relationally. I would tape it in session with their phone and then have them use it. It's pretty easy to have them listen to it and just tap, that's.
Mhm.
I think that's pretty easy to do. And it's like, take this home and I want you to listen to it 3 times over the weekend, right? And if you want to listen to it more, that's fine. I'll charge you extra.
I love pulling somebody else in too. So it kind of not just makes it us.
Spread the wealth,
Maybe.
including, if there's a trusted friend who would do it, it's going to help the friend too, as it turns out,
I've had parents who have thanked me for it because they are able to also get through like meltdowns
Correct.
where their emotions aren't coming up
Love that.
because they're now co-regulating and they're doing the tapping themselves and they're just working through it. So I've had even parents that are like, thank you. And like siblings are in on it. I have one family that they all do it because they're all in services. But as a family, like when they're in heated arguments, they all just are like, all right, we're going to breathe together and we're going to tap and we're going to work through this. And it's really helped that family. So.
The way people around the world all drum together or all dance together, right? I mean, this is never new, it's always good to sort of like give credit to the fact that this has happened for a long time. And in Linda's long list, she probably said it and I associated, but just the idea that alternating bilateral stimulation engages the parasympathetic nervous system, that it just in and of itself calms you down. I mean, people are always asking, how can I calm down? How can I calm down? Well, you could use your breath and you could use tapping to calm down. And if they know that, and if the added feature is that also it can strengthen a positive thought you have about yourself or a positive way that something's going to turn out, big win, and free and within your body's ability to do by yourself.
Absolutely. You did say one thing, and I would just clarify that anybody can do this. That's absolutely true. And if they activate something that's negative, they need to have that container. That's really all, right? To say like, no, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not working with this memory. I can put it away. And so that's really the way I would practice the container first with everybody, because again, it's the break, right? Okay, we can put that away and go back to the positive thing. Whereas a lot of people, when they, if they tap into the trauma, that's it. Now that part goes offline and that's where they are. So to be able to say, like if you keep tapping, and you tap into something that's unpleasant, put that in a container and see if you can come back to what it was. Maybe you have to pick something else. And that should just be like, part of the instruction,
Yes.
it might go bad, and
Yeah.
it's not the end of the world, and you just pick something else. And I think that's pretty easy.
Thanks. So this is just feeling so incredibly useful. I'm kind of pulling threads from the whole conversation. I'm thinking back to my client that I brought up, and the idea of rehearsing positive behaviors. And there's this weird piece where I don't think she's always honest, because she doesn't like to be a disappointment. She does see herself as a disappointment. So when she's trying to do, she'll tell me that she's followed through with things. And some, like going for a little walk or things like that. And sometimes she has, but I'm not sure all the time. But I'm wondering if that absolutely doesn't even matter, and we could be tapping in those positive behaviors, and that might actually increase them.
Yeah.
And increase her ability to do them.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if she did it every time
Yeah.
she told you to do it, but just if you're privileging, resourcing, validating, making more, making prominent, making, really emphasizing, highlighting, platforming, any of these positive behaviors with tapping it in, it's just going to reinforce in her nervous system and make it more likely that she has that choice point. She has that whenever she's at that trailhead of, I could become dysregulated and eat a bag of chips, do something terrible, blame myself, or I could go outside, or I could exercise, or she may be more likely to, because the marble can roll down one of two ways, and if we're going to increase the possibility of that marble rolling down doing the adaptive behavior, then great. So the more time you spend tapping that in, the more likely you've sort of raised that up as that, or you've deepened that groove, so the marble's more likely to roll down that groove.
That's the skiing reference.
Or skiing. Yeah, I don't know.
In the rut,
yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah,
but then really what it is, most of these things are procedural memories from, if we're talking about the early trauma, right? They're procedural memories there are no words to them. People they are compelled to act in a certain way because that's the way they acted before. And dissociation is the perfect example of it. It's like people's heart rate starts to go up, and then all of a sudden that starts to go down, and they're in this, hypo aroused stage. How do you get them out, and how do you explain it? Because that's really what it is. And you're giving people like, here's where it's happening. You come by it honestly. You come, like when you don't have a fight flight, you can't get the hell out of there. It's the escape where there is no escape. So it's, you have to congratulate the whole organism on doing something that got you out of being there for the whole thing, but you can't control it now. It happens without your volition. But if you can bring it back under your control, I think dissociation's fabulous. I mean, it really is. I mean, for the dentist, it's the best thing, right? It really is. I mean, I always say, like, they ask you questions. I can't talk. You got all shit in my mouth. Why do I have to be here? Right? I don't really want to be here. So I go to my comfortable place. That's what I do. And the same thing. I got my dentist to have a chair the same chair that the psychiatrist has, where it goes back and forth, so the arousal thing. I think that, the parasympathetic nervous system, if you have high arousal, that's what you're going to use. But even if you have low, when people come out of that, they come into a sympathetic nervous system state. So then you have to do arousal reduction too. I think that all of these things, I appreciate that people are like the idea of here, this is a client I want to talk about. That's really why we're doing it, is because it's not like, oh, you have to know about dissociative identity disorder. No, you have to know about the people that are sitting in front of you. And, if there's a lot of dissociation, that is really where your work's going to be, is to convince them that being in their body, you said she started out here, right? Started out just, convince them that being in the body is safe now. And it has to be. If it's not, you can't lie. But it's safe now to be here, and being embodied is better than not. And being here and present, being mindful, right? Being here, paying attention to the present on purpose without judgment is much further away from your trauma than dissociation, because dissociation, there's a lot of things that go right into those trauma networks. So do that kind of psychoeducation with people at any time, to be able to say, like, this is why it's important, or this is why I think it would help, and again, it's all, if you have early and often trauma, you have to do it all relationally. And again, when you have borderline personality disorder, interpersonal abandonment is huge. So getting somebody to realize that they have a self, and that the self is getting built, and it's more and more stable every time, right? That, there's every time that they do something different, that's progress. You have that has to be mentioned because people are like yours. It sounds like really, and yours too, Kel. That really easy to say, oh well, that doesn't matter. I'm still a loser. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Just discount all the progress that has been made, and that puts you and it puts you, Kelly, and Jen. You're all in a place of we're failing her, and I don't believe that for a minute. I don't think that's what's happening. I think that when you have severe trauma, when you have a lot of trauma, it's math at some point. If you had a lot of trauma and nobody to regulate you, you have to learn those skills, and it's going to take as long as it takes, because people are also not just they're not just in a hospital, they're living their life. They have other things to do. So these, part of that is to recognize and how do we improve that people's quality of life then, like in the present, and get them to a point that if they want to process memories that they can. Wow. So again, I hate the fact that EMDR is like there's such a thing that you say like you're not doing therapy anymore, you're doing EMDR. It isn't that, right? That's part of the therapy, and using your imagination and doing tapping because it brings on the parasympathetic nervous system is therapy. It's not anything other than. I think that those 3 assessments that I give, I'm going to send them to you. If I haven't sent them to you already, I'll send them again. But I think that they're helpful, and just anytime, like if you say no, I'm not sure that I got all of the information here. Do a screening. Just do those screenings. Say, oh, you know what? I just saw this thing on attachment. Do you have any interest in doing the screening with me? Because it's not like a horoscope. It's more of these are the strategies you use, and maybe there are some other strategies you could learn. And I don't. It's not really forcing anything on anybody. As most chicks know, relationships are what people are coming in for, right? And we get guys come in more so that their wife wants them to come in, or their boss wants them to come in, or they're fucking up in a way that somebody knows they need to come in. But I think relationships are the easiest way to do it, because you have people with the narcissistic traits or narcissistic tendencies. They still have all of the attachment needs. They're just tamped down.
So Linda, you do the screening with them, or do you have them do it at home?
Well, if they're a new client, I haven't taken on new clients, but if they're a new client, I have them do it before they come in and bring them in with them. And just to make sure they understood the directions, right? Because sometimes with this DES, some people misunderstand, and they're like, it says, in the last 6 weeks, but they're like, I don't know. I thought 100% meant that I did it once. And, so whatever. So you just make sure they understood. And if you go over it and you say, well, this is where I see you're high in dissociation. Does this sound like something that happens to you often? And then, say why you're asking. I'm asking because if you had trauma early and often, this is really the only thing that you had available to you as escape without escape. There's no, so you were able to do that. And I think that to be able to say, yeah, you came by it honestly, if it's, you have, attachment strategies, let's say, and they're disorganized, of course they are. Right. And explain why they are, or, you have this anxious attachment, or you have avoidant attachment. Yeah. And there's, you came by that honestly, and there's way to earn secure. Is that something that's of interest?
And I don't, just procedurally, and if you're all virtual and you're doing it with them, you could always have a paper version in front of yourself. You could pull up share your screen. You can go through the questions with them, and then, mark them down, and then go back over it afterwards, just in case you're wondering, well, how do I do this if they're not sitting in front of me? That's what I always did when I used to do with PTSD. I do PCL5s or whatever, and I would always just share it so they could see it with me or read it with me, and then, but I would be scoring it, and then let them know afterwards. So
yeah, and again, I always tell them why we're doing it. If screening is just like if I didn't meet them yet, I send them the screening, and if they would bring, they would bring it in with them because this was before the pandemic, right? So people come in, but I would still do it even like if I thought to myself like I've been seeing this person for a year and a half, and I really don't have a handle on whether or not they're as dissociative as I think they are, I would do a screening with them. Then the same thing if I wanted to get somebody interested in attachment, I'd go back to that. People saying that people are pesky, relationships are pesky, emotions are stupid, you're weak, whatever they are, then you're looking at avoidant, right? And then you have some information of, okay, so is this the way relationships generally go for you? Then you say what that is. And if they say no, then you say, okay, well, tell me how it is, right? And I think that's how you get people to I don't want to say contribute, but really get engaged in therapy, because you're saying, well, what's important to you, and what's important to us are our relationships, right? And even if you don't know it, that's, we're not meant to be here by ourselves. That's all I have today. I wanted to do a session, and I want somebody to do a session. Who wants to do a session?
I'm not keeping my hand up for that. Can I add a little bit to the
Go ahead.
assessment part?
Mhm.
Because I work with kids and they're very concrete, I will do them every 90 days and then I will just show them, like, regardless of what it is. But I've done this with I had a little person that I worked with and he was very dissociative. And so it was every 3 months we would kind of look at it, and he was watching the numbers go down, and he was like, I can feel the connection between that and feeling more in control. So using that, I have found, is a really good tool of like being able to quantitatively show clients like, look,
Progress, yeah.
yeah, like I think I could start using that as that triumphant as well of like, look, in the last 90 days, you have gone from this level to this level. I think we should tap that in.
And even saying that, he said, I feel more in control. So let's bring up that. So what does it feel like to feel more in control, and tap that in, right? It's progress. And what does it feel like in your body with, when you're less dissociative? Because people really think it's going to be terrible to be here and now.
Yeah, he's actually almost discharged because he's been doing so well. Like his dissociation's pretty much gone. Like it was a lot of anxiety, but it was just, he had a lot of stuff from being a little person and having so many surgeries, and mom always babied him. But like coming into middle school, he like never was without an adult 6 feet from him. And
I remember him.
they were, yeah, that kid. He's doing so well because it was looking at his aid and going, he's not, like, he doesn't need help with math. He is a regular kid. Like, yeah, he needs help with the bathroom because he physically can't pull his pants up. But other than that, like, this kid can be on his own. Like, I don't know why, like, why would he have to deal with the anxiety, or why would he have to deal with this when he can just associate and an adult around him is going to do it for him? And I called him out on that, and it has truly changed everything in his life, where he finished this school year where he was like, I walked in the classroom for a different kid, and he was not, like, his IA was facing a different way, helping other kids in the classroom, and he was over with a bunch of kids, which was never a thing. Like, he would always cling to this adult, and like just giving him that power back has been huge for him.
And again, so we started that out with the agency, right? I mean, we're not reparenting them. We're giving them, we're letting them do it for themselves. Laura Pearls, Fritz Pearls' wife, who was actually the therapist of the family, that's what she used to say: give people as many resources, as much as they need, and as little as possible, right? Because you want them. We're trying to promote agency, and this is, this is something you can do on your own. I think Fessel used to say about, we shouldn't just be refueling stations for people where they only feel safe with us. It's about feeling safe with themselves. It's about feeling that they can get themselves out of dissociation, or they can, put their head in some ice water and get their biology under control so they can think again. I mean, those kind of things are really, I think they're the most important, especially early in therapy, because everybody's not coming back to you, but that doesn't mean that another time they won't think that therapy was helpful, because they get some skills in during the assessment, that kind of stuff. That we were getting feedback from somebody, Gerard. What were you asking for feedback on? Did people use the triumphant self? Was that last time? Gerard and I were talking about it, and I was thinking what we were going to ask. We were going to ask, because like the last time, Kelly, were you with us last time? And you had done one. So
No, I had to be at a funeral last time. I done more, but I got the things that you sent out, and I actually did use the Pharaoh with a couple clients.
The Triumph resource, yeah.
Yeah.
How'd it go?
It went well. Actually, I used it just this week with this client I was talking about, and she I was surprised at the moment she picked. She didn't pick like the graduating or getting the degree. She picked when she moved away and got that apartment where she was going to grad school in Chicago, and herself unpacking in that apartment. But it went, I mean, I hadn't, her face relaxed and lit up in a way I'd never seen it.
Nice.
It was really kind of cool.
And she's remembering herself, right? And we're just reminding her that, well, you're just reminding her that she can do hard things and she's done them. That's what gets lost, right? So powerlessness, I say helplessness and being alone. So anytime you can get them to remember when they were connected and they did have agency, I mean, anything you can tap in like that, I think is really valuable. Not just in the beginning, but especially in the beginning. Anybody else use it? Tell us your story. Nilsa and Jen, you can tell you used it with Jen. And how did it go? She said it went well. How'd it go for you?
I thought it went really well. I mean, she was a great person to do it with, and I think it helped out.
Yeah, I can tell you when it was, but I'd like to keep the details around it private.
Oh no, honestly, I don't even remember. I just remember like,
but you were
cares?
awesome.
well. I remember
Well,
it
no,
went well, and that's all I remember.
It was amazing. I think we really because I think the Fiero moments that I was coming up with, we sort of sorted through them a little bit, right? And I really appreciated the pushing to like, well, I can't remember what you asked me. You know, it would have been cool, I guess, if one of us took notes, but it was around like, well, what about that? What about that was triumphant for you? And it was about me actually like seeking out more healing in a really like dramatic way. And then having this experience of having had this healing experience. But I don't know. I've never felt so like held and heard and empowered.
Nice.
That's awesome.
It helps that I know her and I love her and she's one of my favorite people on earth. So like I didn't have to work through any of that like vulnerability stuff. But which, you know, our patients feel already, the ones we've had for a long time. But I think Nilda's ability to really like focus. It was you know, because I could be easily all over the place with a million different thoughts and experiences and traumas and whatever. And we really just stayed very focused on how are you going to pull this in? How are you going to remember this?
I just want to make sure I know this. So I brought up an event where you were able to do it and you had this triumphant self, and then did you bring it to, did a behavioral rehearsal for what you were going to do? Or no?
We didn't do the
Okay.
behavioral.
No, I just misunderstood. I'm sorry.
Love to see a behavioral rehearsal. But yeah, it was.
You do one, Nilda. I'd love to see that.
Oh no, I don't want to do it. I want to see it.
I love this.
See it, do it, teach it, community. You know this.
Nilda and I have taken over this whole damn workshop. I'm sorry, everyone.
Fine, but I would like to see that. I would like to see something either, whether you're using some parts of the emdr, whether you're doing a behavioral rehearsal, whether you're doing triumphant self and bringing it to something that has to be, you know, something that you need to feel confident and competent in doing. I think something like that would be good. What do you think, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, you mean right now, if somebody could just come up with something and we watch.
I was thinking like somebody have something that's coming up that maybe you haven't done the triumphant self might be a good one to do. Or if you know you wanted to do something with like bring your worst client and that kind of thing. I think both of you brought your hard clients, right? You said this is what you want to do, or you know that's something we could do. The dissociation piece is not going to be something that I can do with you guys because
Sure.
you don't have it. But I also was away in Australia and I did 4 sessions with people and we used all of these resources and they all came up during the traumas, right? It was unrestricted session and all I kept saying was, you know, can you feel Aunt Patricia's arm on your hand on her shoulder? Can you feel, you know, like, so just pendulating back and forth between trauma and resource. And when I get it edit it because I'm just putting in why I did what I did. I'm happy to send it to you because this is just the easy, it's like so easy to do. Once you have the resources, like before you do the MDR session, you just activate them and people have been using them. So they're there at the ready. And some people say, no, I'm bringing them with me. They're coming with me on the whole trip, right? Sometimes I don't, I let them run the scene first, but it doesn't, if somebody says, no, I want to bring my protector figure or I want my adult self with me the whole time, that's fine. And again, I think the clients know what they need. I really do. I think that anybody that's ready to do EMDR, I already think they have the skills to stay stable and they think they have the skills to stay stable. So they kind of know what they need. So I'm happy to, I'll send one of them out and you guys for the next time we do it. I want to do this again. I think I'm away next week, but I'm away next month. We could do it at the end of the month if you want. But anyway, I think that doing a session is what you guys should be doing. And I know that there's, should all over you, but I think it's really, it's really the most effective way to do it. And I know you know that because you're practicing it with people and Rebecca and Kelly. Like, I think that that's something, if you want to do it, I always think you should do your worst therapy when somebody's watching.
And I'm kicking myself because I'm asking this question and I'm like waiting for you to go, well, let's try it. But what happens when you have a client that really, really struggles to come up with a triumphant moment?
Okay, you have a client
because they're all the triumphant moments kind of like are infected by the abuser.
Okay.
Like they get the triumphant moment, but then the abuser's there that parent is there to kind of negatively impact that.
Okay, so you say they don't have any moments of triumph, or they don't, what is that what you're saying?
And I think as I'm saying it, I'm thinking that the way I'm explaining it is maybe causing people to think for major events. And maybe I need to kind of say, well, if we can't have that, what are some small daily things that felt
and
hard?
I think that maybe you could come up with them based on what you know of the client, right? So if you know that they've made this they've done something that was hard for them. It doesn't matter if it was hard for anybody else. If it was hard for them, tell me how you did it. You were at the point where you could have walked away and you did it anyway. What was that like? And that moment, because it's really only moments we're tapping in. It's not the whole thing. It's that feeling of, I had what it takes to get through this, or wow, I had I'm shocked, but I did it, I must have some, something. And I think that you may be right if you're saying I always say a degree in here because, when I'm doing it with therapists, because I know you got degrees. I sure hope you got, they got degrees. And so that's one of those things I would say, but I mean, like passing a driver's test, right? If you had, to take it, I'm thinking for adolescents, or teaching a skill to somebody else, something that, for therapists, like getting a letter, from a client where you thought that, hey, I didn't do so hot with this. And you hear years later, like this was what changed his life or whatever. Like it can be really anything. So I would use just what the person comes in with. Like, do you have something, do you have a client in mind?
I think I'm thinking of I'm pulling a couple different people that had difficulty celebrating big moments because of the negative family around it.
Yeah. So
that sort of grief that, well, this was supposed to be a celebration and it's something I accomplished, but then there's this negative around it. Like I had to worry about being embarrassed by their behavior or whatever.
So if that's the case, if that's like, if it's really, that's all around it, I wouldn't use that one. I would use something that's more of just basic, like something that you would do, like if they were able to say no to somebody, or if they were able to say yes, right? If they were participating.
Can you use them actually like coming in? Like them coming in?
That's
yeah,
fabulous.
because I mean, I feel like that's like the most accessible because you're right there doing it. Like you had the choice, because I do this with my kids. You have the choice. What are you getting from this? Because you had the choice to walk into my office or not. So I wonder if that could be like a starting point, at least to give them some inkling that they can do something.
I think that's an awesome idea, Rebecca. I love that.
And really to elaborate on your idea, to say more of, when you decided to get therapy, what was that like? Because it's usually it's months, people thinking about it and how, and then, or if you told me something that you were really afraid to tell me and it went okay. it didn't go as bad as you thought, like that moment, those kind of moments. So the moment that I decided that I was going to go to therapy, why, like what was around that? Well, it has to be something about caring for yourself, not, not wanting to kill yourself, whatever those things are. So I really like that idea. And again, it doesn't have to be something that's everybody would consider courageous. It's just if the person was afraid to do it and they did it anyway. Like I said, I was using the thing, it's an honest thing. I was in grad school with that table thing. I went out and I was doing a week-long course, and people were already sitting, and I thought, do I have to go sit in my car and eat? I really thought that, right? And I thought, so I said, hey, kid, the seat taken, and everybody was just like, say, of course, sit down, and it was like, ooh, that's different. But it was courageous of me to do it because I was afraid. It's like, I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but that was like a thing I would always do. It's like, oh, well, just get away from them, But it's like one of those psychodrama courses where you have to kind of come up and say, yeah, that's what I did. So I figured, let me do it differently. Anytime you did something that, was something that is out of your norm and it went well, those are all kind of moments you want to tap in. And I think that, to say rather than we're doing EMDR, it's just like, okay, so you're doing therapy and something comes up and you go, oh, not just tap that in, let's stay with that. And let's think of other things, because that again, you can tap that moment in, but they are also related to other times when people, did well or did something for themselves or whatever, whatever it's connected to that's not negative. And I think those once you have those moments, the more moments you have, the less likely you are to go right to the trauma memory.
Showing up for the running club, with my gay clients, are you going to go to any pride events this month? Can you just look for them and even plot them out on an Excel spreadsheet? I'm thinking one guy who loves Excel spreadsheets, share the spreadsheet with me. Can you just go to one? Are you looking at are you watching any gay programming on TV this month? Here are some, the ones that I think you should be watching. Those things. And then they come in and you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. Wasn't it amazing when that happened? Yes. Let's tap that in. It's so great that you tolerated watching the whole thing. That's incredible. Oh, you watched it with someone. Wow, that was brave. I've reclaimed brave. I worked with veterans for 10 years and I really got tired of the word brave because it's misused a lot and it's icky. And bad things happen to them when they were supposedly doing something brave. But in these contexts, I love the word brave suddenly, because it's like, oh, you did something that you were afraid to do, but you did it anyway. And it was something that, and it's helpful to you, because the more you do it, the more you are adding to this arsenal of opportunities, to feel good about yourself and that you can do stuff. So yeah, just all the brave stuff. Like that was brave. That was amazing what brave was. Tap that in.
Yeah, and that's the phrase I like is, it's only courageous if you're afraid, because certain things that I do, they were never scary to me. And people go, oh, you can speak in public? Yeah, that doesn't scare me. But he asked me to go sit at a table, like that, so it's what is it for the person, and if you're afraid and you did it anyway, even if it didn't go well. I think that's one of the things. Say, okay, so what happened? What could we have done differently? What could you have done differently? Or could we think of things you could do differently the next time? And we'll, kind of do behavioral rehearsal and see how that goes.
Yep.
I think all of those things are like real opportunities. And again, it's like, what you do in therapy. How can you add this to it rather than to say, well, instead of therapy, I'm doing EMDR. That's it's how do you incorporate this and make it work for you and your clients? And I think those are really good ways to do it. And people get used to doing that. And then EMDR is not some scary other than, and I think that if people, I would be afraid to do EMDR the first time I did, not really scared, like, oh my God, but what's going to happen? There was a lot of uncertainty. So if you have clients that feel like that, which they probably do, after they get through it, can you tap in how brave it was that they did that they went there, and I usually have people do first or worst, but how was it that you summoned the courage for that? Because that's, you want to tap that in too. Like at the end, like this is more part of the triumph of you got through this. It was a memory. You knew it was a memory, but that's not what your body felt, and so it had to help, you were able to stay in it the whole time. How is that for you? And you want to talk about ending a session. That's a really good way to end a session.
I actually have my hand up, but I'm kind of glad that you didn't see it.
Oh, or you want to do something?
But now I'm speaking. Well,
Okay.
I felt like all of this talk about fear and, asking to sit in your seat and it's making me feel like, okay, I'm super afraid of doing anything in this setting. And maybe I should.
Who are you the most afraid of? Me, Gerard, Rebecca, Jen?
Me.
You're
Me.
afraid of you?
I don't have my template in front of me, so this is just going to be coming out of my head. Just in terms of performing, like being okay, like doing this in a setting like this. I'm one-on-one in my sessions, no problem. I can come to
Who's
life.
being
But
watched?
being watched.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
before we do this, I just think this is one of those things to do. We'll go around and say, how much are you going to judge Nilda as a person? Gerard, how
I'm
much?
gonna judge that she is so helpful and that this is a great thing. And so I've got nothing but 100%, tens across the
The
board
only
for
one
me.
that put her hand up. What do you think, Rebecca? Are you going to judge her harshly? I think you should.
No, working with adults scares the crap out of me, and that's why I don't like doing it in here. That's why I'm with kids. So no judgment.
I hope that you do something wrong, so there's some learning here. But if you do it perfectly, I'll be okay with that too. Jen, what do you think? You're going to judge her?
I love Nilda no matter what she does all of the time.
I'm gonna be grateful that she volunteered
You
and
didn't have to.
amazed at her courage. Yeah.
No, actually, I applaud you because I don't like performing in front of people. So
I appreciate you volunteering because I did really want to see it and I was scared to do it myself. So I appreciate you volunteering.
Do your worst.
I'll do my
Yeah.
worst.
Do your
I'm going to
worst.
purposely mess up.
Oh, look, no, I mean, because you're going to see if you quote unquote mess up, what do you do? The next thing. I don't, it's not, you got to kind of think of mistakes as really just like, oh, well, that one didn't work. Let's go a different way.
I
Now
got
we
me
need
benefit last time. It'd be nice to do it for somebody else. I mean, so
who would like to do a behavioral rehearsal or what else we want to do? Let's do that. Triumphant self and a behavioral rehearsal, or somebody want to have you want to have a conversation with your younger self, or you want to, I like the idea of doing some of the triumphant self. And then if somebody wants to, like bring up something that maybe they wanted to try and do differently the next time, if somebody has something like that, or do you have any ideas, Nilda?
I was just thinking the triumphant self if somebody wanted to do that and then see what comes up.
Like it, I love it. Who would like to do the triumphant self with Nilda?
I will if you want.
You already said you didn't want to do this.
I don't want to be a clinician today.
Fair enough. You're moving you in.
And she's been a clinician. She deserves this.
I have been. Yeah.
She has. I got news for you. I talk about Rebecca all the time. She's why I want to do train the trainer. It's like these are things that everybody should be able to do, and she's willing to get up and do them. And I love that. And I love that you're doing it, Nilda. So we'll all go dark. And you can do triumphant self. And if there's somewhere else you want to go with it, Rebecca, you would know what that is. If there's something you want to practice or something like that, that's great. I'm trying.
I have a kiddo that I work with that it's not necessarily that it's a bad client, but this kiddo, every time he walks in my room, I am already on edge. Just every time. I don't know what it is about him. I'm not the skills provider I work with also has this where every time he's in the office, it's like dread almost that we have to work with him because he's a hard kid to work with and he's very rude. So
when he walks into your office, how are you different with him than you are with other kiddos when they walk in your office? What do you notice?
I'd say the first thing is that I know I notice that I'm getting agitated as soon as he walks in, because one of the first things he does is that he sits down and he's like, when can we play Uno? Because he's very motivated by getting to play games, and I understand that that's the thing he wants out of the session, but anytime I saw him this week and I didn't do anything differently with him. I was asking him, I had a great family session with him and his sibling a couple weeks ago, and his sister and him went an entire week without arguing, which has never happened. And I was like, what was different, And even using the voice I use with my littler kids of how is this different? What was good about this? He broke down and started crying and shut down and refused to talk to me the rest of the session. And I'm like, I don't know how to help you, my dude, if you sit there and do this. And he does this every single session where it does not matter what we talk about. He shuts down emotionally and he will not talk. So it's just that. And then if we do get to a game, he is so competitive that he will say the rudest things of like, well, that was a stupid decision, or you shouldn't have done that, or I wouldn't have done that if I was you. Like he's really rude about it. So
it sounds like he doesn't want to really talk about anything emotional. He kind of shuts down and loses it. And then when he is playing Uno, he is very competitive and rude to you.
yes.
Disrespectful. Okay.
Yes.
And what do you notice happening? You said but you mentioned when he walks in, you feel
Yep.
agitated.
Yeah, I can tell my breathing is more shallow. I can feel my heart racing a little bit. And I notice that I will not look at him as much as most of my other kids. Like I make pretty good eye contact with my kiddos. But with him, it's like I notice that I'm looking around the room more. I'm looking at my desk more. I'll like look over at my screen a little bit more. I also notice that I like move my foot more when he's in there. Like the anxiety, like the anxiety gets worse.
Okay. Do you have other difficult or like kids that come in that sort of bring some of that up in you? And
Yes.
when that happens, have you had moments where you've actually maybe not even noticing what you did, but like where there's been a shift in the kiddo you've been working with?
Yeah, I have. So two of the schools I work at they're all high acuity kids. They're the kids that can't be in traditional school. Um, and one of them, I'd say about 3 weeks ago, he typically like he can be very rude. He's very like he's been physically abusive to teachers and other classmates, stuff like that. And I started doing resourcing with him, and I got him to a place where he was like crying in his comfortable place, and just having that raw moment with him was really powerful. And then when we ended the session, he was like genuinely happy, and I had never seen him genuinely happy. So being able to see that shift for him was really good.
What are you noticing right now as you're telling me that story?
I'm smiling. Actually, as soon as you asked about him, I felt my shoulders drop. I don't know if you could see that. I felt my shoulders drop, and I felt my breathing, just I sighed.
Can we
Like,
just tap that in right now? Go ahead and
yeah.
tap that in. Just notice that. Just tap that in. Noticing your shoulders soften. Your slow breathing. Just notice it. Good. Can you tell me what you noticed when you were just doing that? What else did you notice internally, thoughts, physical?
I noticed that I took the same breaths that I do when I co-regulate with my kids. Like as soon as I start tapping, and when I do it in my personal life, like I do the same exact breathing. So I felt that. And I felt myself like doing this. And then I was like, why are you doing that? And it's like, I don't know. Okay, I can stop. So
When you notice yourself doing that, I can stop. Was it like more of a like, nervous thing, or did you like? Let's be curious about that coming up. What was that about you
yeah, I
and
think
I can stop?
nervous. Part of it is that I know that there's a group of people watching. But also just like it's really uncomfortable thinking about like the imposter syndrome, almost of like, what is it about this kid that's supposed to be like one of my most difficult kids that I can get through, but this other kid I can't.
Has this imposter syndrome? Is it come up in other areas for you?
It's just
Yeah.
usually with uh specific kids that I work with. They tend to be the ones that are on the spectrum because they don't process, and that's a lot of what I do with kids. And they're more concrete. It's hard to do the type of therapies that I do with them. And because I'm community mental health, I don't get a choice in who I see. um, but yeah, I think that
It
answers
sounds
your
like
question.
it sounds like they're bringing in something that's really difficult. Like it's already it's difficult to sort of meet them somewhere. That's what's happening. That's what's coming in. There's other moments where you've had other kids, like this other one, where you were able to meet him and see something happening. Can you talk about other times, perhaps, where that's happened?
I mean, I've had kids in the past, not necessarily ones on the spectrum, but I've had kids in the past that like I have seen a shift in them, have successfully discharged. I get an email from a kid. I haven't had it in like 6 months, and I get regular emails about how her life is going. She just likes to email me, and then I got a handwritten letter from a different kid right before school ended. Her teacher was like, our prompt was to write to somebody who changed your life. And I haven't seen this kid in a year. And she wrote to me and I bawled my eyes out. And so just like having that, feeling of even if I don't know if they're doing well, like I've made a difference in their lives.
And these are kids on the spectrum. These are kids that
those two, actually, the first one probably is just high functioning. The second one was not, but like even still, I mean, I do have one kid I'm still working with that we've been able to get like a diagnosis, and like dad now understands him better, and so they're both functioning better. So he's probably my most successful kiddo with that.
So we have somebody after a year, somebody who's made a change in my life. She writes you a letter. And then we have a kiddo who through your work has now had his dad be able to understand. And so not only have you made a difference with him, but also at home. Can we just notice that and just tap that in? And just... If you can just stay with, what it was like when you saw the note and you read it. Or the words, just notice them. Can you share what you're thinking right now?
What was that? Sorry.
Can you share what you're thinking right now?
Yeah, just like opening the emails from, she's now graduated from high school, but like opening her emails and like knowing that when I had her at the beginning, she was in a place where she was like, I'm not going to graduate. I'm not going to go to college. I'm going to end up like my parents. And then the last email was, I'm moving into my own apartment with a friend and we're going to go to college. And I've gotten so many grants that I don't even have to take out loans, which is huge for her. So that just the joy that I get from getting those emails is what's going through my brain.
Just notice that. What else are you noticing in your body? Just notice, breathe into it.
Just relaxation. Feel like my shoulders aren't as tense. My hands aren't as sweaty because they were earlier. Just a sense of stillness, calmness.
But you've been pretty successful with your kiddos. Done some good work. Can you notice that? How does that feel like?
Just pride in myself and pride in my kiddos for doing the work and their families for doing the work. But I feel it in my chest, like a warm sensation in my chest.
Seems like you really show up for your kiddos. You really care about them. Just notice that. I wonder if we could maybe take this, what you're noticing right now. And maybe you can notice yourself with this other little kiddo, the one that is difficult to walk in. Can you maybe notice yourself walking in with him? Walking into the office. And he's there. What are you noticing now?
I'm like imagining that I'm just taking my own deep breath before I even start with him so that I'm calmed down before I even start the session. And just knowing that the more escalated I get, the less I can help him, because if I'm already elevated, he's possibly going to be feeling that. So helping myself calm down can be what helps him through a session.
And let me ask you, have you helped others that have been agitated, that have had difficulty when you've walked in, you've been able to help them? And how do you know? How do you know you've been able to help these tough kiddos?
They're usually able to verbalize it or I can see the relaxation and the calm sensations. Like I can see their bodies. Linda hates this word, but I can see their shoulders sagging. I can see just the relaxation in their shoulders or their breathing, or they're no longer crying by the time that they leave.
How about the letter you got?
Oh, I had to calm myself down.
Some, in terms of some of the ways that you have already told me you've helped these kiddos, right? You have emails, right? You have difficult kiddos kind of coming in agitated or crying and leaving. So can you do this work when you're sitting with this kiddo? Do you know that?
Yeah. I think it's just reminding myself that sometimes these kids just need an adult who's present, who doesn't judge, that just holds the space for them, because a lot of my kiddos don't have that at home, whether it be their parents are too busy or their parents are dealing with their own issues.
Can you see yourself in session with them now? You can maybe just close your eyes and kind of do, I guess, walking in and trying to hold what you just talked about, what you're feeling right now. Imagine yourself sitting with him, just letting him be what he needs to be. And notice what happens. What are you noticing in your body right now?
I can feel myself more relaxed thinking about it. But it's also, the immediate thought is not, I can't do this, I'm not good enough to get him through a session. I just need to be holding the space for him for what he needs today.
Just tap that in. Yeah, you just have to be holding that space just for today. Just for this one moment. And then the next. Just notice that. Breathe it in. Nice deep breath. Do you feel like we could be doing anything else right now? You could be doing anything else in this moment with him?
I think also just reminding him that I'm here for him, that he can use the time how he needs to, and that if today needs to be that he sits and cries, that that's okay, if that's what he is needing in this moment.
What's coming up in you when you're saying that? What are you noticing?
I'm not as agitated. I can feel, again, that relaxation, but just feeling, I don't have a word for it, better, of knowing that I'm still doing what I should be doing in my position, even if it doesn't feel like I'm actually doing anything, that he could still be benefiting from just me being there.
Do you feel like there's anything else you need right now to help you with this moment?
I don't think so. I think it's just that reminder that just because I'm not sitting here talking to him, that he's not processing through things, that I'm still holding the space that he is able to do what he needs in that moment, rather than trying to do the more therapeutic things that I do with most of my kids.
That's beautiful. Breathe that all the way in. Just breathe that in. So how do you feel like you're doing in your work as a therapist at the school with this kid?
Better. And it's also reminding myself that just because he's there to see me doesn't mean I'm the end all be all, that it needs to be a collaborative effort, that I don't have to shoulder everything or any success that this kid may have.
You're not alone. All you have to do is show up, be in one moment after the next with him. And you're doing everything you possibly can be doing, and you're doing an amazing job. What are you noticing when I say that?
Validation, again, that warm sensation, kind of like when reading the emails and the letter of, I am doing what is needed for this kiddo, and it's not just solely on me, that there is another provider, that the school is helping, that his parents are helping, his siblings are helping.
In that moment with him, the time that you do have, are you good enough? What are you noticing inside when I ask that question?
It's hard to verbalize it, but I can feel it.
Where are you feeling it?
I can feel it in my chest, like the upper chest, but it feels like I can't say the words, like they're stuck.
Where are they stuck?
Like the back of my throat. Like there's something that's keeping them from coming out of my mouth.
Maybe a little curious about what that something is, and just notice and maybe ask it. Just ask that part of you, like, what's getting in the way? Just notice whatever comes up.
Because I have to believe it in myself. I can't just say it if it's not true, if I don't feel it's true.
Is there something that part of you would need to be able to believe that you are good enough? Ask, what is it that part of you needs?
I think it is just reminding myself that I am good enough and I am doing what I need to be doing. And there's a lot that's asked of me, and I can't be everything for every kid, but I can just do what I can.
Excellent. Just tap that in. Just keep tapping that in. And can you remind that part of you too about those beautiful emails? Does that part know that those emails as came in, what students you have helped?
Yes.
And I heard you say, I'm good enough.
I am good enough for the kids I have and being a clinician that they need, even if I'm not the clinician that they'll always need.
Are you noticing anything else that's coming up right now?
Just a sense of relief.
Where are you noticing the relief?
My chest.
Is it okay to stop now, or is there anything else that you'd like to work on?
No, I think it's okay to stop.
Okay, thank you for letting me do that.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate that.
Can I offer a suggestion?
Yes.
If Rebecca, if this is something you might want to do, if you don't want to do it, don't. I would have you close your eyes and imagine you asking him when he comes in to play Uno first. You say, "Can we play Uno first?" I love my favorite interventions are switching roles, but just see what he says and start the tapping. What do you notice?
He's happier. He's got a bright smile on his face and he's really excited. Like he almost can't contain himself. He can't even sit in his chair.
This is part that I would recommend that you do in your mind, not in the session yet. But if you could practice switching places with him, doing a role like doing a role reversal, where you could gently say the things that he says to you, maybe one of them or two of them, just so he gets an idea of what it's like to play with them. And again, it has to be as gentle as you know it has to be. What do you notice?
It's like he's got that aha moment. Like something we worked on with his sister was being able to walk in another person's shoes and literally switching their shoes and had them guide each other. And just seeing that aha moment when he had that realization of, oh my, I have to start seeing from my sister's point of view, and him also having that in that moment of, oh, I can see what I'm doing.
That's the moment that you want, right? I know you're tapping, but that moment of when he had the aha, there was other people, wasn't necessarily you did something genius. You might have, but it's not necessarily that. There's other
Yeah.
people involved. What do you notice?
I can hear him apologizing and asking how he can work on that, how he can make it better so he's not acting that way, especially towards his little sister.
Does it seem feasible? Like something that could happen?
I think so. She is his favorite person in the whole world.
Oh. Nilda, that's all I have. So you can just take back over. Okay, I'm going to shut up.
What do you notice coming up now?
I feel more in control, where I think I felt very out of control before with him, of like, it was him guiding the session, it was him causing himself to shut down, but I feel more in control of the session and just the understanding that he does not understand what he's doing, and he needs to he needs to eventually learn how what he does affects others, and just him having that enlightenment of this is how others see you, and he knows he wants to change. It's just, I think, him recognizing that he needs the change.
And what are you noticing inside right now?
It's like a burden's gone, like in my chest, like in my sternum area, like there's a burden that's just not there anymore.
And how about in your throat? What are you noticing in your throat?
What was that? I'm sorry.
What are you noticing? You noticing anything in your throat?
No.
Okay, so the burden's gone. And you
Yeah.
want to just tap that in a little bit more? Great. When you're ready, you can stop and open your eyes.
I almost started crying, not gonna lie.
It's okay to cry.
Just feeling that relief.
You okay to come back on, Rebecca?
Yeah.
Okay. You guys want to come back on? What do you think, Nilda?
Rebecca, it was wonderful to work with you. I think you're amazing. It sounds like you're an amazing clinician. And
Thank you.
it was when I got into it, I felt better. Like I forgot you guys were there. But at first, I think I was tripping over how I don't know how to incorporate the tapping with just, and then I'm like, I'm just going to do it. Let her keep tapping. And that felt better. That felt more natural. And when you came on around the the playing Uno, it's funny because I was in my head trying to do, well, this is triumphant moment, but I'm also doing rehearsal. But then how do I, so I was kind of, so I was thankful that you came in to say that, because I get that would have been more of like the rehearsal piece, right?
I would think, but and actually that was just like an experiment, right? I mean, in Gestalt, that's what all we do is experiment. And so if that fit, good. If it doesn't fit, okay, it doesn't fit, go back to what you were doing. That's really good.
I took notes and I circled that like in the beginning. I kind of like looked at that as something important, but I guess, yeah, it was, I felt like it was okay. I felt okay.
All I want to say is I only came on because I can't shut up. That's it. If your session went fine. There was nothing else that had to happen there. I just thought that Rebecca, like I know Rebecca more than you do. So I thought, okay, well, let's have her do something different, because the same thing, like if you just go in, okay, you're going to walk in again. Well, what else could be different? Well, if all he wants to do is play Uno, I think that's, you know what I mean? And then if you could switch places with him, because you don't want to play with him because he's not, it's like you're going to keep cheating, or you're going to tell me what a fucking idiot I am. I don't want to play with you. And how do you get that across? And that's always like role reversal, if you can do it gently enough. I think role reversal is a great tool. And I am so I would have just said that was fine to stop there. And then I don't know if it was helpful, Rebecca, but either way, I couldn't shut my mouth. That's it.
Oh, it was all helpful, both of you.
How was it? The whole thing, you were all right with it?
Yeah, like being able to tie in. Sorry, my cat is deciding to be annoying now. Just to tie in everything was really good, and then being able to remind myself that it is about being creative, especially with the littler kids. Well, little kids, he's in middle school, but especially with the younger crowd that I work with, like being as creative as I can be, along with remembering that it's very likely that I won't be the last therapist that they'll ever have. Like they'll be adults and they'll probably have therapy again. I'm not the end all be all, and I'm not going to fix these kids, and because they're not broken, they're just there for help. So
yeah, I think, and it's when we put it on you of, oh, we're going to heal someone. That's when you get fucked up, because it's not what we're doing, right?
Well, my favorite is when parents sit them in the seats and they're like, here, fix my kid. And I'm like, they're not broken. I can't fix them.
Take them back.
Also, what are you doing to help? Because I see them 45 minutes a week. So
I loved when you got to that place where you're like, I can just hold the space, right? Like I loved when you were able to like let go of that, whatever, like, well, I have to do something, and no, just let go of doing and just being.
yeah, because especially for this kiddo, like I don't think he has a single adult in his life that just when he's having an emotion just lets him have it.
You guys are all open for feedback, if you're open for feedback.
Yeah.
I just have a question. I noticed that Nilda was tapping at the same time. Is that I like that, because I feel like that actually as a therapist helps keep you calm. But I was just curious if that's typical, what I don't know.
I do it. I just follow the client, however they're tapping, I do it.
Mm-hmm.
And
I do it too.
Neuro-linguistic programming for the, like kind of getting into the position that the person's in, to kind of feel, it's not like feel what they're feeling, but it's you're embodied the way they're embodied, and tapping with them. I mean, I say I'm tapping with you, so whatever you do is fine.
But it's different than if we're using the tappers, right?
You can turn them on whenever, but I mean, you can always tell the client to stop tapping, take a deep breath in, stop tapping, and check in, right? So
Right,
it's not really that different. It's really, you're following the client, like you would set the intensity and the rate, and then, if you're processing something, you're going to vary the rate a little bit, where this, you're just going to, they're varying the rate anyway.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Question, Rebecca, what was it in the beginning? I sort of more just had you talk and then like, okay, tap, and then like we stopped, versus just tapping all the way through. I'm not sure if you could was there a difference that you noticed on?
No, the only thing that, and it's not even a criticism, I could have done myself is remembered to put everybody else in a container because that was a little bit of a distraction. I just thought about that. I was like, oh, I could have put everybody in a container and focused just a little bit more at the beginning because that was an on me thing. So
But I also always start with the like I was saying to Gerard earlier, I usually always will do like a container at the beginning, like okay, is there anything we might need to put in there? So yeah, both of us kind of, well, not both of us. I could have done
Both of you could have done it because
Yeah,
We
no,
both
I
could
could
have
have
done it.
too.
We're both therapists.
I do it so often I could have done it myself. Yeah.
well, yeah, you could have both done it because we're watching, and it matters, right? That there's a performance to that or a vulnerability to that where, you have to recognize it, but then put it away, right? It's there, and can I focus on what I want to focus on rather than that?
But to your point, like it's important to make a mistake, right? And I think that is at the beginning as the person leading to be able to be aware of that and hold that space. So
Yeah,
thank
and
you.
have clients tell, like, these people very well, if they like Rebecca could have said, well, I need to do a container if you were your client, I mean, that's how often you would be doing this, that somebody would know they need that, Go ahead, Jay.
No, I mean, some days you're going to do a container, some days you won't. I mean, it's a choice you made. I mean, to call it a mistake maybe is, maybe a little strong. It was a choice point at the time, or you didn't think of it, but you were also thinking about what am I going to do next? I just like, Nilda, how you really took the time to sort of get to explore each of the triumph moments with her and the specificity and focusing on the body and really giving her sort of like a whole array of things that she could refer to and connect with, and then I was curious about how you were going to move it into the next time you're with the kid. What are you going to do? And I actually thought that what Rebecca did, which is just noticing that she could center herself more or could be calmer going into the room. Because when I heard Rebecca say earlier, like, yes, this kid makes everybody upset, right? So this is like now the thing about the kid. And I have that with clients where I'm like, oh, this woman, when she comes in, I become de-skilled and I've got a whole narrative about it, right? So before I even get started, I have to do deep breaths, remind myself that I'm good at what I do, and then not make it a self-fulfilling prophecy where I'm already up here when they walk in, right? So I liked that. I liked the idea of using it in that way, and the result of Rebecca saying, yeah, I can actually just be connected with how good I am at this, and that I'm fine, and that this is probably going to go. This could go okay. And then, of course, Linda's brilliant addition is good.
Unnecessary.
It was necessary. It was great. It was great.
It's a useful other option.
Because I want to know the behavioral rehearsal part. That is part of the behavioral rehearsal. I love that.
Yeah, but what you do is the behavioral rehearsal too. Like you're going into the room and you're going to like bring all this confidence with you. And how do you think that might be? I mean, I was thinking what it could have also been, Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is your main gig, is, what would it have been like if he, this next time you go in with this, he has a different response, like what can you imagine that happening? Or is that not what you would do, Linda, in a case like that?
No, as a matter of fact, I should have just shut up because the way that Nilda did it was absolutely fine because she had, Rebecca was sitting there. The only reason that I wanted to say something was because there are things that make it different. And I think that if you do that behavioral rehearsal, that the next time he comes in, the whole thing's coming up. And you have a choice. Oh, we could do this, I could do that, or I could just hold the space, whatever it is. And I think that's more helpful than to say, okay, just go think about how good you are as a therapist. I think it's like, okay, what are you going to do differently? But you had already done that. You had her in the room with her, and then Rebecca came to it of, I could be quiet, I could not be dysregulated. I think this is what I don't like, sagging and elevated, because they're confusing to me. When people have sagging shoulders, I think they're collapsed, right? This thing, that's confusing to me. It's not that it's wrong. You got me. And
I said you
elevated to
didn't
me.
like it. That's what I said because I used it at that training, and you were like, "What does that mean?"
I don't know what, because sagging to me seems like, oh, okay, like I lost my will to live. I lost my will to hold my shoulders up. Do you guys have anything else? I know we're after 2, so do you have anything else for the feedback for Nilda? I thought you did wonderfully.
Yeah.
I always said like the way people talk, I'm like, oh, you could be my therapist. You could be my therapist.
Thank you.
I appreciated both your vulnerability in doing this and Nilda, I just the way you sort of seamlessly and gently guided Rebecca through the places where you wanted her to go and helped her get there. It was really lovely.
Thank you.
I also liked the back and forth. It wasn't just we focused on the kid, then we focused on the letters, and it was that back and forth that really helped.
And that's the idea of bringing the neural networks together, right? Here's your competence, here's your here's where you feel incompetent, and bring them together. Okay, I see it. Gerard, your people are much quieter than my people. So
All right. Well, I'll do some coaching.
It's fine. I'm just noticing. It's just an observation. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you two doing that. That's really what I want to see. I want to see people using it in the way you use it. And if you're using it in your office, you won't hear me screaming anything.
I wish we could have you there with a little camera, like Secret Service agents will be in our ear.
No, you've been doing this you've been doing this a long time. You guys have all the skills you need. It's just you're doing it in a different way. And remember, you're skilled clinicians to start with. This is just something that's a little different. And if you can say it to the client, we're doing something a little different. So I feel a little funny. You probably do too. Huh?
Thank you so much. Thank you for that opportunity.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your participation.